So
Okay, we're going to start, folks. Good evening. This budget workshop program review is hereby called to order at 6:02 p.m. I'm very pleased that you've taken time to join us this evening. I extend to each of you a sincere welcome from the entire school board. Thank you for your interest in Judson ISD. We've established a quorum, and I will call roll. If you'll please mark yourself. Thank you so much. We are all present. The next item on our agenda is the public comment period. Ms. Holmes, did we have anyone sign up for public comment? No one's speaking tonight. All right. So we will then move straight into the discussion items and reports. 3A, discuss and review information on proposed 2025-2026 fiscal year budget. Dr. Fields.
Yes, ma'am. So what we'd like to do tonight is first we will start off with the finance department, who will go through our past budgets, or not past budgets, but where we were last year versus where we ended up, where we are this year. And then I asked Mr. Brooks to actually go through some of the recommendations that came out of the growth and planning meeting to the board. And these are just recommendations. We're not voting on anything. It's just information. And then I asked Dr. Taganaw to speak a little bit about some of our thoughts on the staffing plan as we move forward, and some of the changes we might recommend there. So, Ms. Davis, if you could go ahead and start, please.
You might need to move the mic closer to you, Ms. Davis.
is it on? Turning it on now. Thank you. Good evening, board members and Dr. Fields. This evening, we're going to start out with a brief discussion on the financials. And as you know, since last month, we've moved our finances to be only 1 month behind. So it's going to be very similar. We're going to go through that portion rather quickly. After that, we're going to go through growth and planning discussions, as Dr. Fields mentioned. And we will be ending up with our HR financial model discussion so that we can be taking a look at our staffing model that affects the finance portion. Next slide, please. Our budget timeline, as you know, this year we have made some changes to our budget process, and we have added 3 additional budget workshops, this being the first one. We're going to have a total of 7 budget workshops, but the first 3 are going to focus on program reviews. We have 1/3 of those program reviews being facilitated tonight, and the reason that we're doing that is so that you have the opportunity to see what we are doing, what might be some of the needs and considerations in order to keep that in mind as we facilitate the rest of the budget process this year. We will be adopting the budget on June 26th for next year. Next slide, please.
So you can see there, after the first 6 weeks, our enrollment is actually 23,661. Our attendance ADA percentage is still pretty good at 94.9, which gives us an overall ADA of 21,136.
Could you speak a little bit about how that differed from where we were last year, Dr. Dash?
So based on those numbers, last year, we budgeted, I believe, on 92.5%, and we ended the year at 93% in total attendance at the end of the year. So we are about an entire point ahead of where we were last year in terms of our attendance. At the same time last year, we were sitting at 93% attendance at a similar point when we did Snapshot in 2023. Sorry.
Excellent. But then the enrollment,
the differences in enrollment between right now and what we had in Snapshot last year, we are right at about 100 students, 100 student difference from where we were last year. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The ADA last year at this same time was at about 93%.
Okay, so the next slide shows the general fund budget. You can see in 2025 what the revised budget is at $251 million in revenue and $273 million in expenditures. And to date, we've collected $30 million in revenue and just over $64 million in expenses. The one thing I did want to point out, you can see under the expenditure side, there's a $3.6 million budget amendment that we're bringing to the board next week. There'll be a little more detail on what it is, but just so y'all know what it is, it's basically, we have a self-funded insurance plan, so this is going to help move that money to help cover the expenditures for the rest of the year from the general fund into the self-funded bank account.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Could you go into a little more detail on the 3.6 million? Dr. Fields and I talked briefly today, and I sent you guys an email about it. Could you expound a little bit on how this
Sure.
happened or what this is?
Yeah, and again, we'll give you greater detail next week, but basically, there's two separate bank accounts. And the bank account has a general fund, and then there's a separate bank account for the self-insured fund. So in order to move money between the funds to when we get bills to pay for the self-funded expenditures, we move money from the general fund into that fund, and we just hadn't moved enough for the whole year. So there's a couple months left, and we want to make sure we have enough in there to keep the payments coming regularly.
So will that money then be returned once we collect the rest of the premiums for this year then? Or did we not collect enough? Like, are the expenses more than our revenue?
It's going to be close. Again, we'll have greater detail for you, and we'll probably give you something prior to the board meeting as well. But there's been, we've been good for, we started in January of 2022, so it's been really positive this whole time. There's just last couple of months, there's been a lot of expenditures that were kind of unforeseen, just, when there's different illnesses and things like that. So it has gone up, so we need to move this money just to cover those expenditures. But it's not something that we normally do. We haven't seen it in the 2.5 years we've had it since we started it.
Okay, yeah. And if you want, do you want me to wait till next meeting and just talk about it next week then?
Right,
With more details on revenue, our actual expenditures and all of that stuff?
Definitely.
Okay,
We can
I
get
can wait.
into exactly where the expenditures came from later.
Okay.
This was just to kind of brief the board, let them know what
Okay.
was going on. But basically, it was just a series of unfortunate events that has led us to the need to get this done. But there will be rebates coming forward. It definitely probably won't cover.
We are predicting that the rebates might be about $1 million, so truly ending at about 2.6, but at this time, we need the 3.6 to cover through the
cover.
end of this year.
Yeah, no, I'd like to talk our stop-loss coverages and what we did with
Absolutely.
premiums, because we dropped premiums hugely, like $300 a family this year. And so if that's all of a sudden having us short on revenue compared to expenses,
That's
then
not-
that
yeah.
concerns me.
I'd like to answer that question
please,
now
go
rather
for it.
than wait till next week. That is not one of the reasons. It definitely has to do more with the fact that the company that we're working with, a couple of things, experienced a cybersecurity event, so they weren't sending the claims for us to pay out in a timely manner. But then, in addition to that, we do have about 30% of the claims, 27% of it, coming from a smaller portion of our employees due to catastrophic events. So now, if you remember, we started the self-funded insurance in 2022 with about $4 million from our general fund. Once we started that, this is the first time since then. So we're on our third year that we've never experienced this before. We don't
Did the drop come
intend.
last year, or did it come with the change in the?
It came with
Came
the
with the
change.
change, January
So it's
24.
Right.
But
Well,
it-
the change was in January 24?
Yes.
Yes.
What I mentioned was in 2022 is when this was established, and since we've been self-funded, this is the first time that we've experienced this kind of catastrophic hits. So we don't anticipate continuing this way, although we know that when we go self-funded, it is a risk that we take. If that,
I think what I'm trying to communicate, though, is when you change from one insurance company, and help me out, Ms. Roberts, if you change from one insurance company to another, they're the ones who dictate the premium, correct?
Correct. So to answer the
It's not
question,
like we came back and said, hey, let's charge everybody less. They said this was going to be the price, correct?
the premium costs less
didn't
for
change
greater
costs.
benefits. Yes.
Right, right. And going from, we had many more options previously, before going to self-funded, we were giving 5 options available to employees to select them, which we reduced down to 2 options. And so it didn't necessarily drop the premium $300 across the board. That's not the case. Because most of our employees were on 2 of the 5 plans prior to going self-funded. So I would say 80% of the employees were on those plans. So it may have decreased premiums for a few employees, but it was not the majority of employees. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
So since this is only 2 years in the making, and I wasn't here, so this, it seems that if people catch on, it might take 2 years, and now you have more employees than expected taking advantage of the
Correct.
plans. Okay,
Once they learn about the plan and.
Right.
And the benefits to the plans.
right,
that we
okay,
have.
okay.
It's been overwhelmingly successfully received from the employee. I can't tell you how many people have come back to me and said that they're really happy with our current plan. Here, do you want to use this?
Yes, obviously, my request would be next week when we see the more additional information, what those services were. I tend to think that there's obviously a pattern of services that we may need to consider some other strategies. So having that information will be helpful for us to decide. I know that Edgewood ISD did self-funded, and then they went upside down severely, and this was some years ago. But that was always been my concern with self-funded, that we'll get into this scenario. So to help us with perspective, just like we're seeing statewide trends where we see deficit budgets across the state, are we seeing other self-funded districts experience the same thing?
We met with Brown and Brown today, and they actually are saying that the self-funded districts that they work with in our area, that they're doing much better than the ones that are not self-funded.
Fully funded.
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, that plays into it, because as we allocate funding, I'm good with providing services that our employees need and their dependents.
And
And
we
you've
do,
got to remember, too, that it is based on our claims. I mean, you can look at other districts all day long, but it doesn't matter because their claims are different than our claims. You know, and when we have catastrophic claims in 1 year, you know, you can't predict that,
And that's the
unfortunately.
case there.
Well, and
Our
that's sort
fixed
of,
costs have remained the same over the years, but it's,
and that's, again, a benefit. So I'm looking at the silver lining here. We are making investments in our insurance so that we can retain quality employees. If we're addressing this, this needs to be sort of talked about. We're making an investment, but naturally, you can't go totally upside down, and then we got to consider what that looks like in the budget.
we do have that information you asked for. Some of it might contain a little more information than, just due to the nature
Sure.
of what it is. And we'll be sharing that with you on Friday night.
And just for my own clarity, since I'm asking these questions, mental health, does it fall under this, or is it a separate?
we have a separate provider that provides that service for us, E&I Next Gen, for our Employee Assistance Program, but it is also covered under our health insurance as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Taganov,
Dr.
you
Tan.
wanted to say something, Dr. Taganov? No?
I just wanted to add that when we bring this back next week, we will have a lot more detailed information, even some broad comparisons of what it would look like to stay self-funded or to switch over to being fully funded. And so the questions that you're asking and like those type of comparisons will have some broad numbers to share so that you can kind of see based on our claims, because premiums and those costs are dependent on the claims from prior years.
And then Ms. Eaton, you wanted, Ms. Eaton?
Forgot about that part. The wraparound services that we have over at Wagner, employees can also, I'm asking a question, I don't know, can they also go over there for the mental health
Yes, they
portion?
can.
Okay.
There is
Okay.
that available at the wraparound.
And is it paid through the insurance company or?
No, that is separate, completely separate, and I don't know how that wraparound clinic, that would be something I had to find out, or maybe somebody else could answer that question. It's
my
not
understanding.
under the health insurance.
I don't
Oh,
believe that
thank
there's a cost associated, and if they do, then they would take your insurance company and see if they can follow up with your insurance company, but it's my understanding there's no cost associated. Yes, ma'am.
Did you have something else, Ms. Ryan?
No, the only other portion of it is that I'm guessing stop-loss renewal is coming up on the agenda in November, December, right? That's normally when we renew our stop-loss. So as we're going into that, if we don't have the right, stop-loss should have prevented this, right? So if we don't have the right coverages for our stop-loss to kind of prevent this in the future, we paid 3.5 million to cover us for when we went over our maximum expected or our maximum liability. So yeah, if we can talk about stop-loss next week with that
It's on the
too.
agenda, I believe,
Yes.
for
Is it?
next week.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
renewal for stop-loss
Yeah.
is on the agenda, and yes, but there is a very high threshold. So stop-loss covers you for catastrophic events. And so there's a multitude of reasons why we're in this predicament, not all because of catastrophic events. And so we are going to get reimbursements for what we went over that cap for.
For some of those.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that'll hit multiple agenda items
Yes.
next month then, thank you.
Okay. And for a bit of good news.
Right, for a bit of good news. So as you know, when we were ending the last year, we were predicting somewhere in the range of a $33.8 million deficit. And I told you, we're going to start watching everything. We watched all the expenditures, everything that was coming through. And we got our final audit report that you'll get next week as well, and auditors will be here to present it. But you can see, when we started our year last year, we had a little over $123 million in our fund balance. And the good news is, instead of that $33.8 million deficit, we have about a $22 million deficit now that audit is complete. So even after that, we'll still have $101 million in our fund balance in the bank. That's all ours.
So is that deficit including the $12 million, the pennies? Or,
No, ma'am, this is the deficit that he's speaking about right now is for last year. When we did last year's budget, we were supposed to come in at about $33 million deficit. This year it was 36. Last year was 33. But we just had our audit completed, and as they completed our audit and kind of closed the books for last year,
okay.
they determined that we only have the $22 million deficit. So we were able to save all of that money from the 33 to the 22, and now there's $101 million in the fund balance.
That doesn't reduce this year's, our current,
This isn't even about this year, it's about last year. So basically, what we thought was going to be a lesser fund balance going into this year, there's going to be a higher fund balance. And what we thought was going to be the original deficit budget for last year, at the end of the audit, was only 22.
Last year, that ended in June of 2024. So, I'm sorry.
That's correct.
No, that is correct. So I know we say last year, but I just want to point out that that's June of '24, which is just a few months ago.
But in this
Does that
school
help?
year is when the 12, the
Gotcha.
disaster pennies and the
This-
12, it'll be for this
this
school
current.
year. Yes.
So the 22 million showing on this slide is, if we take the 101 minus that, that's what our deficit would have been? Where was our deficit before this got here?
So when we were going through the budget process this spring, in preparation for the budget that opened up in July, so if you remember in February, March, April, when we had our series of budget workshops, the question was always asked, what are we forecasting our deficit to be? And so we kept coming back every month, and it would change a little bit every month. So the final forecast that we gave you was ending June 2024 with a $33.8 million deficit. But we also said we're going to be monitoring, closing POs, we're going to cut departments off in the spending right in April, maybe move it a little bit earlier, just to try and prevent a greater deficit. So we were successful in that we were forecasting 33.8, where we actually ended up, now that our audit is complete and will be presented to you next week by our auditors, at 22 million.
So the fund balance would have been about 22 million less if this hadn't
It would have been actually
I think about 89, it probably been 89 million or something like that. Now it's 101. And then if you go back to the general fund budget that Mr. Guerra left off, it shows our forecast. It's a little too early, but we do have a deficit coming up for June 2025, and it shows where we're going to end up then. You would subtract that amount from the 101. So it's a better position than we thought we were before.
Any questions? I do. Yes, sir.
So the obvious question for me is, I guess we will get more when we have the auditor talk to us next week. I'm just very curious where this money came from. Just, but let me, I guess it'll all be kind of in the report, but we should get an understanding of where or how we ended up with a surplus. And this is good news.
No, yes, sir, absolutely. And like I said, when we're doing budgeting, we have to make certain assumptions throughout the entire end of the fiscal year. So even though there was still budgets available or still open positions available, we have to make those assumptions that they could be filled or that money could be spent if something happens. We did watch it, and we tried to cut as wherever we could, so that money was able to cut back as well. But we do have to make those assumptions, especially when we're starting out the budget. That's why the deficits sometimes look bigger, because we have to make the assumption that if I give somebody a budget for their department or their campus, we have to assume they're going to spend that entire budget. And if we have open positions, we have to make sure we have the money for those positions if they do get hired.
And of course, I know that we had Region 20 as consultants with our budget last year, and Jose Elizondo was a part of that, and his philosophy is always be extremely conservative with expenditures, and so I could see that kind of falling out.
Yes, sir.
But I would be interested just to see where that revenue is. And again, take a minute just to commend Mrs. Davis for her hard work in the finances. You joined us in June. Absolutely, absolutely, you guys. And so we're here now, and this is why we're having a conversation for the following years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we're excited for the auditors to present to you next week, so. Okay, and these are just the child nutrition budget and our interest and sinking budget, which is the bond budget. One thing I did want to point out on the child nutrition budget, you can see there's a deficit budget on there as well, but that's strategic and that's planned because the child nutrition budget works a little bit different than the general fund budget. It's not everything, we get to keep everything, and the more the better. In child nutrition, they want their fund balance at a certain range. If it gets too high, then we can get penalized or get written up for it. So we have a strategic plan with child nutrition to make sure that fund balance gets, that deficit gets, the fund balance gets spent down, so we stay within that range that we need to. Yes, in the interest and sinking budget, it's good. We just did a refunding that was very successful for the district that we're going to save, I think, about $3.8 million, which is a little higher than we thought to in the beginning, so that was good news for us. So that solidifies that we have enough to make our bond payments every year still. Yes, ma'am.
On the fund balance itself,
Yes, ma'am.
I was curious, because I don't know, how is the fund balance funded? Where does the money come from to grow it? I know where it goes when we lose,
Sure.
but.
Yes, ma'am. So simply put, how school finance works, we get paid per child per day. So the revenue is generated that way for us. So all that revenue we get for 1 year, say it's a certain amount, and our expenditures are less, whatever's left over from that revenue generated goes into the district's fund balance. So if it's $123 million, it's been built up over time slowly. If the expenditures are greater, which is our deficit budget now, then we have to take from that fund balance and to cover the books to close them for the year.
So it only comes from years where we don't spend as much? That's
Correct.
it? We never
When we have a surplus budget.
pay
yes.
into it?
Correct. And the state wants, there's no requirement. They would like a 2-month minimum of operating expenditures in your fund balance. So with us, about 5.5 months, we're still fairly healthy, even though we've had a deficit budget this past year.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And are
Thank you.
there any further questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
So next up, I'd ask for us to kind of play musical chairs here for a minute. And Mr. Brooks will go up with his team. And I asked Mr. Brooks to just briefly go over some of the recommendations that came out of the Growth and Planning Committee for the board, so you can be made aware, and we can open it up for any type of other community feedback in any other future board meetings that we have. But it was pretty simplistic. There were 2 recommendations for elementary, and there were 2 scenarios presented, 1 recommendation for elementary, and then for middle school, and then for high school as well. So, Mr. Brooks.
Good evening, board. I'm a team of 1.
Oh, no, you got to rest. You got your other team coming up here with you.
So, as you know, as Dr. Fields just said, we're preparing to open 2 schools, middle school and elementary school, fall of 2025. And so, as we prepare to open these schools, in our Growth and Planning Committee meetings, we've been having discussions and getting recommendations from that committee on not just those 2 schools, but the district as a whole, and how we can, rather than changing boundaries for those select schools, we wanted to look at the entire district and see if we can't go ahead and build new attendance boundaries for the entire district and take care of it all at once. And so, as Dr. Fields just said, we got some recommendations from the Planning Committee, the Growth and Planning Committee. There were plans 1 and 2 for elementary, middle, and high school. I'm going to go over overviews of the different plans and what plan was voted for by the committee. So the first plan, Plan 1, the northern portion of Wortham Oaks, the elementary area, the northern portion had a swath of students on the very top tier of the area. And so the plan in this Plan 1 would be to move those students down to Rolling Meadows. Those students would be bused down to Rolling Meadows. Second point, Rolling Meadows Elementary Attendance Zone would be split at Kentucky Street. There's a street there in that neighborhood where Selma is being built, to where if we split the attendance zone, we keep some of the students who are currently attending Rolling Meadows at Rolling Meadows, but then we would send the remaining students in that area over to the new Selma Elementary School. And what that does is it keeps an adequate number of students in Rolling Meadows, and then also an adequate number of students at Selma Elementary. The other portion of this plan would be to have Coronado Village Elementary School remain where it is, functioning as it is, with dual language also being at Coronado Village, and Spanish immersion being at Wortham Oaks. Now, the advantages of this, we would have manageable student numbers at both Wortham Oaks and Rolling Meadows. The Spanish immersion program would remain at Wortham Oaks. Some of the disadvantages to this plan, Selma Elementary would open kind of underutilized, wouldn't have the what we feel would be adequate numbers at the school. The northern portion, obviously, of Wortham Oaks would be bused to Rolling Meadows, so that would be an extended travel time for those particular students getting to school in the mornings. One of the bigger disadvantages would be that we would need to spend approximately $4.5 million to staff Selma Elementary. And then, again, talked about the extended travel time for the students at Wortham Oaks going to Rolling Meadows. So that was the recommendation for Plan 1 of the elementary schools. So if we move over to the next slide, Plan 2, which, as you can see, was the plan that was voted on and selected by the committee. The northern portion of Wortham Oaks would remain there in that area. Those students would attend Wortham Oaks Elementary School, wouldn't have to be bused down to Rolling Meadows. Next bullet, Rolling Meadows Elementary Attendance Zone would still be split, that Kentucky Street split. We would still do that because we feel that that still provides adequate numbers to both Rolling Meadows and to Selma Elementary. The next bullet, Coronado Village Elementary School, the staff and students would be relocated to Selma Elementary. So all the staff, all the students would go to Selma Elementary School. The dual language program would move to Selma Elementary School. And then the Spanish immersion, there's been a bit of a change there, and I'm going to ask Dr. Saunders if she could speak to the Spanish immersion plan that has changed since we had this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. So after getting some feedback, we took a look at the numbers a little bit more closely. There are approximately 80 students in the Spanish immersion program right now. 70 of them actually belong to the Wortham Oaks attendance zone. 5 of them are staff children, so they kind of belong to the attendance zone as well. And then the others are, the remaining students are school of choice. So we're talking about phasing out the Spanish immersion program. It would actually do that naturally as we move through each grade level. For example, right now there are currently 21 fifth graders in the Spanish immersion program who would automatically be going to the new middle school anyway. So we would then attrit 21 of those kids through phasing out the program. So what we talked about was leaving the Spanish immersion at Wortham Oaks and phasing it out year by year, which would in essence mean we will not actively recruit any incoming first graders into the Spanish immersion class. And just as a reminder, Spanish immersion is different from dual language in the fact that you have to qualify based on your kinder CLI screener. So it's not like a family can just say, I would like to engage in Spanish immersion like you can dual language. There's actually a qualifying factor based on their screener.
It's important to clarify that 2 of the grades, and there's 5 teachers dedicated to the Spanish immersion program over at Wortham Oaks with 80 students. So the return on the investment really wasn't there. In addition, at the, I believe it was 3rd grade, 4th grade?
First grade currently has 18. Second grade currently has 18, third grade has 11, and fourth grade currently has 13. And then the 21 would be going to the middle school because they're fifth graders.
So we could combine the 3rd
Yes,
grade,
sir.
4th grade together, so it wouldn't be a year after going forward, it'd be 3 more years.
Yes, sir.
In which we would sunset that program.
That is correct.
But when we look at the amount of funding that's going into it versus the amount of students that are there, not unlike the converse scenario, it doesn't support what we're doing. Well, just the teachers alone would be $75,000 times 5.
A little bit under $400,000, just for the salaries alone, plus, of course, the cost of running programming.
I wouldn't recommend it. It's definitely a board decision, but I wouldn't recommend that we sustain a program like that. We don't.
No.
I mean, there's 80 students.
Especially when we're having conversations about classes sitting at 23 kids and we're talking about having one teacher teach 11.
Correct.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how that would put us in a better place.
Well,
So that's something we would stop spending.
correct.
Correct.
So I
And
was-
in addition to that, we have 5 teachers who serve primarily teach and instruct Spanish, whereas we keep talking about needing dual language teachers and teachers who speak Spanish to support students. So those teachers could better serve different programs, such as the dual language program.
Yeah, so we'd be phasing that out in 3 years?
In about 3 years. We don't want to just cold turkey stop it, but we know that we don't have other students go into the program, and then over the course of the next 3 years, because we're combining that 1 grade level of the 3rd and 4th, then after 3 years.
Correct.
Then we would sunset the program.
And this is an enrichment program, like, just to be clear, it's something that we offer, it is not required.
Sure. No, I'm just listening for the
Yes, ma'am.
savings, actually.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
savings would be the 5
Yeah.
FTEs.
Yeah.
Well, a
Maybe
little bit less than
about
4.
that, yeah.
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
When did we start the Spanish immersion program?
5 years ago, sir.
Because it was requested or because
Yes,
the
sir.
district decided, let's try this?
It was requested.
It was requested.
And the district
By
said-
parents?
It was requested by a principal at the time, and it was requested by a principal at the time to the previous superintendent as an opportunity to offer an enrichment program for students in that school.
I have some additional information on that, Mr. Salinas, only because that's my school, my kid was there. The hard part up at Wortham, so Wortham had dual language originally when it opened, and part of the challenge was there were not enough emergent bilingual native Spanish speakers in that area, and a properly run dual language program should have 50% Spanish, 50% native English speakers, and there wasn't enough of a population, so it kind of substituted that program, then sunset out of Wortham, and then they sunrised in a Spanish immersion that could just have native English speakers and still provide, because there was still a lot of interest in learning Spanish. They just didn't have the other half of the program willing to go up to the Wortham area.
So the parents of the first graders will be notified that eventually in the next, when they get to be fifth graders. After fifth grade. After fifth grade? Yeah, but that program will no longer be there.
That is correct. And it would do that naturally anyway, even if we didn't sunset the program. Those
Yeah.
first graders would
Yes.
go all the way through fifth grade.
So Wortham Oaks still gonna have the dual?
No, sir,
No.
they do not have dual. Dual
Oh,
would be.
they don't have dual?
Correct.
Coronado has the dual.
And the new Selma Elementary will have the dual as well.
Oh, okay, so that'll be available.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
There. Those 5 teachers, we're not gonna eliminate teachers.
Oh, no.
We're gonna keep them as
sir.
employees, but probably on a different elementary or
Definitely.
wherever they're needed.
They're needed right now. We have positions that we need bilingual teachers in currently. So there's more than enough room for them throughout the district. But if we can keep them at that campus, we keep them there.
Yes, okay,
I was going to add that.
I like.
We're not going to make anybody move necessarily.
Yes.
Correct.
Can I ask a question about, I saw where you were gonna move some students to the new, to Rolling Meadows.
In the first plan.
That was in Plan 1.
Plan.
Okay,
That's not
so
the-
then that's,
not the
we're okay now.
Recommend.
Right.
No, sir.
Yeah, because I had a concern
Yes, sir.
about that. Why
And
we,
everyone did.
Okay, okay.
Yes, sir.
because I had not been in this conversation
They're
and,
gonna bring us Plan 2. This is what they're recommending
Yes.
for next week,
oh, okay.
Plan 2.
Okay.
You know, Ms. Eaton, you said next week. The reason why we're bringing it forward right now is because we just want you to chew on it for a month, have people come in and give you guys feedback. We probably wouldn't ask for you to vote on it until December.
Okay.
But at least by December, we would need some confirmation from the board on how we can move forward. So then we can start bringing in principals, bringing in teams. Transportation needs to start redrawing lines to transport students. So we really got to get the ball rolling by January.
I got you.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you done?
Did you have something else, Mr. Salinas?
I just, thank you for the information, and thank you, Ms. Ryan, for bringing that up for me. I appreciate it. That's it.
Yes, sir.
Just some clarity, I know that we talked about potential savings of about 400,000, but we wouldn't let these teachers go. They would still stay at their salary, I suppose, or would we diminish it since they're not in Spanish immersion? I'm just trying to figure out if that's how it would play out.
So
I know, I'm gonna get there.
I think you're saying if they choose to stay at the campus and teach, the stipends that are available are only for those teaching Spanish immersion and bilingual. There might be an opportunity for the first grade teacher who's going to be phased out, right? The first grade's moving on to second grade, and since we're not intaking another student, but I believe there's possible retirements within Spanish immersion in the upper grade levels, so they can choose to stay in the Spanish immersion program, choose to stay in Wortham Oaks should a position be available, but stipends are available to those teachers in Spanish immersion, dual language.
And I realize the savings, that Ms. Faulkner had brought the point about through attrition, these teachers would still stay in. But my question ultimately was coming to retention. If you tell a teacher who is making X amount of dollars that you no longer will get these stipends, they may not want to stay here. They may want to go to another district that has Spanish immersion. And just, again, putting it out there. So obviously, I'm sensitive to that part. I guess you guys will work through that, but
There's nothing for us. I mean, we have a plethora of dual language positions that they could go into, we no longer will have the Spanish immersion program.
And it's
So-
competitive to their current salary?
Correct. Well, it's the same stipend.
Okay, well, then that's fine. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Since all the questions about Spanish immersion, all the current Spanish immersion students will be allowed to matriculate and phase out. So the program's not disappearing. I just want to make that clear.
Well, I want to be clear as well. In 3 years, that program will be gone.
Sure.
And if they want to stay in naturally.
Naturally.
So
not
if they
third
want
year.
to stay and keep the stipends, like for the first grade, if they didn't choose to take the fifth grade one, then they could go into a dual language position.
Absolutely true.
But there, I mean, we want to keep those teachers. We're not looking to lose the teachers. We just don't need them in Spanish immersion. Yes, ma'am?
So if we're looking to vote on this, and this doesn't indicate what we do with Coronado, does it? Do we know?
Yes, ma'am, this does. This is the recommendation that we would take all of Coronado, from the principal to the child nutrition workers, from all of the students, and then transport them into the new elementary school, Selma Elementary.
And then
And we would
Coronado?
bus them over.
Okay, and then the school itself,
We would have to speak about how we repurpose that facility later on. But we're not bringing the repurposing of the facility right now. We're just trying to get to a position where we can start letting people know where they're going to be attending school in fall of 2025.
so it would just remain empty while we decide what to do?
We have more than enough time to determine how we would repurpose to where there would probably be no emptiness associated. We're just trying to get this done by December, so now we'll have from January to when school opens in August to start letting people know what they're going to be doing. But also during that time, we can start talking about how we would repurpose Coronado and what the recommendation would be. And then, once we made that decision, simultaneously, after they transfer out, prayerfully along July, because we want them settled in the new campus prior to the start of school in August.
Okay, so December's coming up pretty quick, and are we planning to have some kind of community meeting at Coronado to let people know this is being looked at?
I've already gone over and spoke with the campus faculty and staff. I would say that we've had the growth and planning meeting. That's what that was for. The reason why we're bringing it to the board now is because we have another program meeting, program review
December
in
11th.
the beginning of December. And then we have the meeting next week for our board meeting. And then we'll have another meeting again in December. So that gives people 3 opportunities to come and give feedback to the board if they have any concerns.
Right, well, the school is one thing, the staff and all, but I'm talking about the community at large.
I would say that at the growth and planning meetings, we had a lot of the community at large at those meetings to come in and give us feedback. And that's what typically our growth and planning committee meeting is for, to get community input.
But it's kind of a narrow slot. Yeah,
Not at all.
growth
We
and
opened
planning,
up.
yeah.
No, ma'am, it's open to
I
anybody.
know it's open to anybody, but I mean, who it actually reaches is not the community.
Typically, when we solicit people to come
That
to the
one
meetings,
time,
we actually went to each principal in the district and solicited them to send themselves and a representative to come to the meeting. So we had this span of the entire district. I will admit to you, though, Ms. Stanford, that due to rumor mill and people's concerns, that it was heavy Coronado at times, but we still had feedback coming from across the district. We had people who are at Escondido, Wagner, other people came to the meeting to give us feedback. It wasn't exclusive Coronado.
So you feel comfortable that the growth and planning meeting itself has properly informed enough of the community, just that meeting?
No, ma'am. That's why we're bringing it right now. That's why we're putting this on the screen. It'll be posted for another month. That's why we're opening it up for people to come in and give the board feedback the beginning of December. That's why we're encouraging people to come in next week at the board meeting if they have some concerns, and for them to come in December. But by December, we would need a decision. and this is the recommendation that came out of the committee. And after speaking with the directors and after speaking with the cabinet, these are the recommendations that we would make to the board on how.
And Dr. Fields, you did tell the faculty when we went over to Coronado Village that should community members approach any of the faculty with questions or concerns, to outline those dates when they can come have their 3 minutes with the board. We also said the same thing at Growth and Planning, and Dr. Fields encouraged the community members from Coronado that were there, bring a +1. Like, this is about getting information. So it's been out there. There's been several opportunities for the community to engage.
Okay. I don't know if growth and planning is the broadest megaphone. So are you going to be announcing it on the website and posting it wherever you can so that enough community members are?
I have no problem getting with our communications department saying, these are the recommendations
Yeah.
that will be going forward to the board on how we'll be doing attendance lines as we move forward. And if you have any concerns, reach out to your board members. Typically, they go straight to the board member. They don't do it in an open, I mean, you've been here quite some time, and so have you. I think that when people have concerns, they usually go straight to you. But they're free to come in at the board meetings, or they're free to reach out to you
I
personally.
just want to make sure they feel we've made every effort to let them know, because these are the same people we'll be approaching when we go for a future bond or a possible
agree.
tax increase. So we want to make sure people feel communicated with. That's concern I have.
I understand completely. We will make sure that we put that out on the website for them to come in and voice it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, a bunch of notes. In terms of the, the sunsetting of the Spanish immersion, I think we'll talk about this more at next week's agenda item anyway, but, an opportunity to then sunrise even more, the dual language program, which was, always kind of the dream within Judson, and it's moved around and it's changed and so much. And I know there's a lot that this program can be, and it's so highly demanded across the entire San Antonio metro. So freeing those teachers up to potentially want to come over and be part of a very robust dual language program and still be able to teach bilingual. Hopefully, many of them will see that as an opportunity to be part of something and join with their other bilingual brethren, at the new Selma Elementary. So, but I think sunsetting it versus just canceling it, I think that, we did that with the dual language at Wortham. We sunsetted that. We didn't just cancel it. We let everybody age out of it. And so allowing those families that did commit to that program to finish it out, I think will be a great relief to many of the parents who have started to email us already. On some of my concerns are, minimizing those transportation routes too, because schools are located all in really weird locations, and we don't want to have to bus more kids than we need to. I'll asterisk that, because I got another question about transportation later when we get to their program review. But like the Kentucky Street split, it's literally cuts a neighborhood in half, and the bus has to drive by, and the entire half of the neighborhood is within 2 miles of the elementary. So now we're busing kids that would otherwise be walkers. So now we're incurring an expense where an expense wouldn't have been needed. And I think I heard it brought, excuse me?
I think it's a hazardous route. We have to bus in.
No, it's the neighborhood right south of the elementary. When you turn left on Amberley and go in there, it's that whole neighborhood. And so they cut it like where the green belt, there's like a little drainage ditch, and Kentucky, I think, is at the green belt. So there's kids who
But
live.
there's no walkway down Lookout Road. So
No, you don't have to be on Lookout. You can, no, yes. There's sidewalks. You walk through the neighborhood to Amberley, come out, and then you walk the sidewalk along Lookout.
I didn't think there
Up to
was
the
a
corner.
sidewalk along Lookout up to where the new school will be. I don't believe there is a sidewalk.
Someone
I'll
drove
drive
it.
it tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, and that's part of the, I can't wait to see the maps for this, because that makes it really hard too, is there's a lot of nuances in a lot of neighborhoods, right? And so I haven't seen, I mean, I sat in the meeting, but I didn't, zoom in on the maps. And I think some of us want to be able to make sure we talk to people in certain neighborhoods to make sure there's nothing we're missing, because that's a lot of neighborhoods and I don't know all the street names, memorized type things. So, but I hope we are minimizing transportation. Anybody who's within 2 miles of walking distance, that we try and, minimize our routes, right, Mr. Johnson? As much as possible.
Do they walk 2 miles?
Well,
Yeah.
I used to walk a mile, really, in the snow.
I walked 2 miles. I walked all the way to Kitty Hawk from Chinook. So, and we did it up and down 1604, back when you could do that.
Yes.
I would tell you that if there's no walkway, then I wouldn't recommend it.
Correct. Dangerous
And,
route exception.
So what we have to do is look on Lookout Road, because I believe Kentucky then comes up to Lookout Road. Then you have to go down Lookout Road before you can go back into where Selma Elementary is going to be. And if there's no established walkway there, then we'll be busing those students.
But I was just curious, is 2 miles our threshold?
2 miles.
That's the
typically.
state of Texas.
Typically, if it's not deemed a hazardous walkway, and
Yes.
we have a few hazardous walkways in our district. I mean, it used to be over at
78,
Metzger,
1976.
coming
all
down
sorts
Ben
of-
Zingelman. There's, and, so there's quite a few places that don't have place for the kids to walk.
Kirby's a mess.
Yes.
My driveway was 1.9, and so I had to call and argue because I'm like, there's no walkway up Benzinman to, there's no walkway on Ackerman, what they're doing now, eventually. But there was, so they needed a dangerous route, and so they bused all the kids. I mean, but when Wagner was first opened, they weren't busing them.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Coronado Village. So we have two very distinct populations at Coronado Village. It's two different schools that cohabitate essentially, because you have the dual language program, which is a huge part of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Which is primarily already bussed in, right? 180 of the kids are already bussed in. So whether that bus goes to Coronado Village or goes to Selma, neither here nor there. So we're only talking about 120 kids, who I assume, many of which do participate in the dual language program, a handful of those 120 that live there. So then we're left with another group that lives in that zone who are just in a regular general education classroom. So my concern is creating, how do I say this? For the ones who are not in dual language, why move general education classrooms all the way up to Selma when there are 2 schools within walking distance of that zone already? So like from Quail Street in Coronado Village, to Olympia Elementary is 1.4 miles, right? So if I'm just a 4th grader who's not in dual language at Coronado Village, why would those students not be absorbed in the other 2 schools? I get the dual language part, and I don't know how big that non-dual language group is, because I worry about creating an attendance zone that leapfrogs in perpetuity, like forever and ever and ever and ever.
First, there's no zone that goes to Coronado that is in walking distance of Ed Franz or Olympia because of the hazardous route. We're not going to have any student cross over Pat Booker to get to another school, especially when we're talking about elementary school students. So we're not going to take a 3rd grader and say, hey, navigate Pat Booker to go down to Olympia. So we wouldn't have any student that would be able to walk over there. And we're definitely not going to have them navigate 1604. So there's no way that they could get to Ed Franz or walk. Next, one of the feedbacks that we received in the growth and planning meeting was that they wanted those students to stay as a cohort. There's 120 of them. We need to put students into schools, and if we're going to be busing students to the tune of, like you say, 150 or 180 that currently go to Coronado over to Selma, then why could we not then bus those students as well and keep them as a cohort that go over there? Now, we could split them and send some to Olympia and some to Ed Franz, but then we're just going to pick them up and then bus them those two ways as well. So for the sake of consistency, for the sake of a lack of disruption for the campus faculty and staff and the students, we just relocate the entire campus to the new campus. And that seemed to be very favorable with the community members and the staff and the faculty.
Especially when we added in the piece that you're not locked into Selma Elementary School if you live in Coronado Village, because you always have the option of attending Olympia or Ed Franz or any other elementary in the district because of school of choice. That's really the safety pin, because as we were sharing earlier, when Rolling Meadows was first built, half of the kids from Olympia moved to Rolling Meadows, even if you were a fifth grader and had been there since pre-K. You were required to go to Rolling Meadows because at that point we were not a school of choice district. So what a beautiful opportunity for our families. Your new zone is Selma, but you're not stuck there. If you're interested in going to Olympia because it's closer, or you want the smaller campus, or you want the Fine Arts Academy, you have the option of filling out a school of choice application.
Yeah. And it's always the transportation.
Correct. You have to
Correct.
provide your
Yeah, for some families, it's always the transportation part. The other note I had was, in some of the other areas of the district, we are also seeing some enrollment capacity challenges. And some of the things that were brought up at a couple of the growth and planning meetings, because we have a board goal, right? We got a balanced scorecard, I got a copy of it sitting here, and we are trying to get to 80 to 90, or our goal is to get to 80 to 90% of capacity in our schools. And we've got some areas down in kind of that Hartman, Park Village, Candlewood, that one little strip right there where we have a number of schools. And if you kind of add up the actual capacities, if we used every classroom as a classroom, of those 3 schools and what the enrollment's projected to be, 5, 7, 10 years out, those 3 schools aren't going to get to 80 to 90%. So while we're redrawing lines and redoing all of this process, is there a reason we're not looking at the other undercapacity areas of the district?
Yes, ma'am. So I would say that our goal is to get between 80 to 90% capacity at each campus. You live in the community as well, and there are just some areas that they don't have a lot of growth. And for me to say, we could say that we're going to now then bus students to those campuses, but I don't think that would be well received. And there's a certain capacity for change during a period of time that is palatable, and then you have too much that can kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. We're talking about moving students from Kitty Hawk to the new middle school. He's going to talk about that. We're talking about moving students from Coronado up to the new elementary. And then we're splitting students away from Rolling Meadows. And then we're moving some students that used to go to Kitty Hawk now, or they'll still be at Jetson Millers Point. Right. So I think now if we said, okay, Kirby can take some more students, but all the students that are there are going to Kirby, and we've made it a school of choice with the STEM Academy. If we now redrew lines and sent students back that way, just for sending them purposes. One of the comfortable things that Jetson has right now is we have 2 middle schools that feed every high school. Kitty Hawk and now Cibolo Creek will feed veterans. Jetson Middle and Woodlake feed Jetson, and Metzger and Kirby will feed Wagner. If we start moving students to just fill schools, then what we're going to find is you're going to start splitting schools as they leave. So half of Kitty Hawk would then have to go into veterans, while half of Kitty Hawk went to Jetson. Half of Metzger would go to Jetson, and half of Metzger would go to Wagner. And now we're not talking about just drawing a line down the middle of the street and some of the kids going to Rolling Meadows and some going to the new school. We're talking about moving kids all over the district. So right now, I think we've done this in a way where the district can absorb the capacity of change. But I think that if we start forcing students into a campus just for the sake of getting the numbers up, we may find, and one of the other things that came up in this discussion, and I'm looking for the cabinet to, chime in. One of the struggling areas that we have right now is from grades, what?
6, 7, and 8.
Well, I don't
6,
think we
7,
got there
and
yet.
8.
We're not talking middle school or high school.
But what
yet,
I'm
right?
saying is if we start doing that and we start forcing numbers, then we got to look at the capacity of the grades that we're moving as well. So our job is to bring the board what we feel is a palatable change that is the recommendation of the district. And that's what we've done here at the elementary.
Yeah, sorry. No, I meant the elementary because I didn't think we haven't even talked about the middle school or
he's
high
trying to
schools
get-
yet. But, my concern is as our elementaries have shrunk in size, then we've lost services to those kids. So now we have campuses that used to have art teachers that have now shrunk in size and don't have an art teacher there anymore. And I worry when we get into budget things down the road and stuff like that, these commodities that we love having in our schools called GT teachers and librarian, all of these things. Well, as your capacity, if you start to get to 300 or 400 students on a campus, those students are going to get less services as opposed to a student at Wortham has an art teacher, right? Because they have 800 students, but a student at Candlewood doesn't have an art teacher. A student at Park Village doesn't have an art teacher. So I don't look at those kinds of changes as taking something away. I look at those as opportunities to give more to our students. And, I know you and I talked about, what is the capacity of the community for change right now. And it is, like I told you, it is probably, we thought after COVID was going to be the most interesting time in education, and it's not. It's right now. Because you read the news, and we've got voter tax increases and bonds, and budget deficits, and people are closing schools, people are building schools, and education is in this total state of flux right now, that I think the community is sitting on the edge of their seat just kind of waiting, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be shock and awe when school districts have to make some major decisions, for the best interest of all of the kids. So if there are opportunities for our kids to get more services and kind of preserve that fighting strength for down the road, because what I don't want us to have to do is 2 years from now have to draw lines again. Like, this is a one bite at the apple kind of thing. Like, we're not going to go redraw and then 2 years from now draw them again and rechange everybody's school. That's what's hard on the community. So if we have 30% of the schools or 40% of the schools are all going to be going through major attendance line changes, why not have 100%? Why not have everybody have to, kind of go through that process because it's what's best for kids and, and it meets our goal. I just don't think we're going to be able to redraw the elementary lines before 2028, and we're going to find ourselves kind of not meeting that 80 to 90% in some of the other areas of the district that we kind of haven't looked at. We just looked really hard in the north, and we haven't really looked at kind of any of the things in some of the other feeder patterns
I think
from
that
an
we have
elementary.
actually looked at some of those campuses that you were talking about, and there have been discussions about some of those campuses that have low enrollment. I don't think the intention is to look at our lines and redraw them again in 2 years, but to address one of your points about missing an art teacher or they have less services, we are looking at making adjustments to our staffing model, which would include the type of rotation type teacher consistency so that it is a little bit equal. And so we're hoping to make some changes to our staffing model to be able to apply that consistency across grade levels. So no, we're not talking about they don't have an art program. We're going to look at that very carefully and be intentional about our staffing to ensure that those programs are more consistent across all of our elementary schools.
In addition to the GT, I would also say this. It's not really about, the funding that we're paying, I've learned about GT, it's not even coming from, it's coming from a mandated requirement. I need you to speak of that. Yeah.
So, about state allotment.
GT state allotment, we are required to use 55% of that towards GT. The way we use it here in Judson ISD is we pay for our AT/GT teacher salaries. And so all of it is spent on that. And in addition to that, this year, to alleviate our local fund, we decided to use 45% of that salary to go towards, from Title I, to come from Title I to pay for those salaries. So that, we increased the number of AAT teachers when we received ESSER funds. Now that ESSER funds are away, we didn't want to impact our local budget, so we do pay for about half of it from
Yes.
Title I.
Yes, but again, you have two GT teachers servicing 700 kids at one school, or you have one GT teacher at one school servicing 700 students, or however their GT population is. And then you have one teacher at one school servicing 300 and one teacher servicing 300. So the bigger the spread of our school sizes, the less equity we get, right? You have one counselor servicing 300, a different counselor is servicing 800 students. And so and I think Dr. Fields, Amarillo ISD is one of the comparables that the cabinet picked, and they had a great infographic that the cost per student of a 300 versus a 600, what was the difference? Like $3,000 more per student to run a 300-student school than a 600-student school because of the efficiencies you can get in classroom size, services provided, and all of these other things. So a lot of districts that are, seeing the smaller school sizes are seeing the financial impacts of these 300 and 400 student schools, what that is doing to their budget. So if you can get the schools all up to 700 or so, there's a lot of financial efficiencies that could happen, and pretty easy to kind of take two of our elementary schools that are 350 and just combine them. Well, that's 700. That's the size elementary schools, are these days.
And put them where?
Hartman and Park Village.
Where would you put them?
Well, so for example, between Hartman, Park Village, and Candlewood, you could fit the population of all three of those schools would fit capacity-wise into two of those buildings.
I can tell you that my concern with the capacities is that facilities has constantly gone on square footage and not on physical usage. And there's a difference. There's a difference. If you just go by square footage, you're just taking off the blueprint saying that's what we can do. I can tell you, some of these schools have been in commission for decades, and they can't hold what the square footage once said that they could. And I can tell you that in some of these communities, it would be difficult to put Candlewood, Park Village, and Hartman at one campus. I need the academic team to speak to the problems with that.
I'll be more than happy to. So a couple of things. When we're talking about allocations, there is a component there of principal discretion based on campus needs. So for example, when Dr. Tagenau was talking earlier about the staffing model, ELOF is a perfect example of that. They have an allocation for an additional specials rotation teacher, and they chose to bring on a STEAM teacher. So dependent on the campus needs, the principal has the discretion to use that additional allotment how they see fit in that specials rotation. Another example may be a campus that's struggling with social emotional needs on the campus may choose to use their counselor as one of the specials rotations because it's access for all students across the campus to receive lessons from the counselor as opposed to just an at-needs basis. So I think it would be dangerous for us to take that principal discretion with the allotments at the elementary out of the picture, right? The other piece too is when we talk about Park Village, which I have worked at, and Wood Lake Elementary, which I have also worked at, those are two completely different campuses that serve two completely different communities. And I think the responsibility of the community schoolhouse is to be a reflection of the community. And when we start to take students from very different communities and put them into the same building, sometimes that identity is lost. And you just mentioned public education is in a different space now than it has ever been, and I would absolutely agree with you. And I will tell you that as a parent, one of the things I'm looking for is for my school to recognize my child's identity. And I think when you start putting large numbers of kids from very different communities in one building, we're actually creating maybe a perpetual problem instead of allowing kids, especially at elementary, to experience education in a much smaller environment. Just my thought.
In addition to that, when we're looking at square footage, and if you were to take every possible classroom, you might have room to fit the students in the classroom, but when you're talking about school and campus life, then you have to think about sending them to lunch. How many lunch periods would we have to run? Because usually the cafeterias aren't sized for that. Especially in some of our older campuses, the cafeterias are much, much smaller. You think about the gym space for the students to go into PE. You think about all of those additional rotations where the students would then have to move around the school. And so in reality, you have the classroom to think about, and then you have the campus life to think about. You would really be sardining, I don't know if that's a word, but kind of the students all in one area. So yes, we discussed capacity, but then there's truly the functional capacity at which a campus would run. Guys?
That's exactly what I was going to say, is the functional capacity. We could, for lack of a better word, cram a bunch of students into a building. But having been on a campus, and I've not gotten to middle school yet, but if the same type of conversation comes up regarding the middle school recommendations and making middle schools larger in number, we're going to have this same conversation. Having been at Woodlake Middle School, and the number there anywhere between 750 to 800 students, if we now start getting up to 900, 1,000 students at Woodlake Hills Middle School, that's potentially a problem, because again, with the matriculation of students in up and down the hallways, cafeteria, gyms, passing periods, there are just intangibles about a campus that you can't calculate here in a numbers format. There are just things that you have to consider being on that campus, running that campus as an administrator, that you need to be able to do. And when you have a large number of students in a building, you make that job much harder for the principal, the administrators, the staff. It just becomes that much harder to deal with. So just my thoughts.
Can I? Oh, go ahead. I don't care. So one other thing, as I'm sitting here looking at you, some of those mentioned elementaries are very heavy on units. And there are some very strict federal laws when it comes to square footage and area needed and facilities needed for those specific units.
For the back unit.
For the back unit, for the Apple unit, for the life skills units. And I heard a rumor maybe that Candlewood might even be up to 3 now. I mean, that's a lot.
Of the community
Exactly.
goes right back to
Exactly. So they are, while they may not be heavy on the total number, they're very saturated with the units and the need for specific facilities.
Well, thank you, and I'll try to be brief, too. I know we're talking a lot about this topic, and it can get really elongated, but this is important stuff, so I want to make sure to say what I need to say. In terms of just starting off with the classroom sizes, I've been a big advocate for smaller student-teacher ratios across the district. The only reason we had to move away from the 21-to-1 ratio is because we don't have the funding to maintain that direction. But I still believe in that being a model that will yield the success we need academically. So just saying that. And back to some points that Ms. Stanford made in terms of the public relations with the Coronado community. I appreciate your work with the growth and planning. I've gone there. I like to listen on what's being talked through. But I will tell you that predominantly the participation is a lot of employees, more than community members. And I learned this through Dr. Ball when she had a growth and planning committee meeting and said, the committee voted that we should have the bond election in May of '23. And I'm like, oh no, we need to have it in November, because the board had to have that conversation. But I could imagine nobody's going to tell Dr. Ball, who was hinting very strongly, we want a May election, I vote for May. So I'm not saying that's happened here, because I love your leadership, Dr. Fields. You include your staff in a degree that I really want to see throughout the district. So, but that lens is there. So, in that being said, talking with the Coronado community, it's already out there. People are already hearing what the alternate uses for Coronado are going to be, and there's some adversarial sentiments out there for that. So in order for us to do appropriate customer service, our public relations, that's Ms. Stanford's word, meet with the Coronado community. Let them know this is really the best option and the best usage of a facility for their tax dollars, because we will have to go back to that community for a tax increase or a future bond. And if we're not communicating and having those difficult decisions, they're going to feel like we just don't care. They can support anything we do. And that block is gone. And they vote in that area. So I see that as just another thing that we could do that could be helpful. And then, of course, the added services that Ms. Ryan had mentioned and that you guys have spoke to, we at the board can make a decision to make our teachers available everywhere, or whatever the services are. We can get rid of that threshold, as Dr. Tagenall stated, looking at our staffing model, and I appreciate that look at that. And then, of course, my last point to make, scrambled notes here. Obviously, I just want to say I support this hard work you guys are doing. It's very difficult to come to a decision that is universally acceptable. I've just come to know in my time that you can't make everyone happy. You do our best to serve our students and our employees. And so far, if the feedback I'm hearing from you is that the Coronado population is okay with moving, I think the only thing we need to do now is have some really open discussions with the bulk of the community, at least offer it, right? We schedule it at Coronado. My last question and point I found in my notes is Selma is supposed to be getting more students. I mean, we had a campus created there because we expected growth in that area. So are we anticipating growth in the Selma Elementary area in the next 2 or 3 years?
I would say that not all the time a school is built in an area because we expect growth in that area. Sometimes it's built to relieve capacity in another area. In this particular case, we would agree Rolling Meadows had gotten huge for a while. Then we opened up Wortham Oaks. That kind of dissipated a little, but Rolling Meadows was still big. Wortham Oaks is starting to get big as well. We're going to eventually have to find a way to, and we will have to revisit this line thing in the future. I don't want to give the impression that this is the last time we're going to draw lines for Judson ISD for a while. We're going to be back here soon, because if the projections of what's going to happen at Wortham Oak come to fruition, then there may even be buildup in between Wortham Oaks and Rolling Meadows where we may have to readjust the lines as we go forward, but that's in communities that haven't even been developed yet. I digress and go back to the reason for the new elementary. Rolling Meadows had gotten so big, we had purchased land there, and then that's where the previous administration said we were going to move forward with making the school this time. We have 3 different sites in the district where we could have built schools. One over off of Graytown Road, one over behind Wagner High School, and the one over at Lookout Road. It was recommended during the bond that it was going to be Lookout Road, and here we are creating that facility. So we're trying to do the best that we can in minimizing the capacity at Rolling Meadows and as much as we can at Wortham Oaks, and then filling Selma Elementary with the students that we can send there.
Well, thank you. That is perfect. I appreciate the response. The other reason about the lines for Ms. Ryan and for my colleagues, vouchers are going to change the game as well. So we may have to, again, look at enrollment next year just based on the impact that vouchers may have on public education.
Correct.
So we're going to be looking at this for a while
Yes,
to reinforce your point. And we just got to roll our sleeves up and get
Yes,
to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Just kind of a summary comment, because we're not done with this conversation.
Not at all, but I would say to Mr. Brooks, if it'll ease the board's mind, we can go straight to the recommendations that came out of the committee as opposed to talking about what we're not recommending. as we go forward. But let Ms. Stanford ask her question, please.
Well, I was just going to make a statement that while we as a board are weighing the advantages of community identity in a school and size and, you know, the advantage of a nice, smaller community feel, we also have to balance that with what we can afford to do. We have to weigh cost as well as these other wonderful things, and our goal to keep a school 80 to 90% full. So we have to keep an eye on schools that are well under capacity.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to restate that, because I know we're not done. I know we're coming back, but I just wanted to restate that. We have to balance all of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the recommended, I'm sorry, Betty, one more. Yeah. So the recommendation for the middle school is that we have feeder patterns that we're making adjustments to, and for the Judson Middle School feeder pattern, we will have, the recommendation that the committee voted on was to have JSTEM move from Judson Middle School to Kitty Hawk Middle School. And then the Judson Middle School feeder pattern would be Copperfield Elementary School, Converse, and Millers Point. And then Kitty Hawk would have JSTEM, Salinas, and Crestview. Those would be the feeder patterns for those middle schools. And so, as Dr. Fields mentioned earlier, each middle school, and I'll get into it, would two middle schools would feed a high school. So the advantages of this was that JSTEM would be centralized in the north side of the district, but then we received feedback from some that, you know, moving JSTEM from Judson Middle to Kitty Hawk was seen as a negative for some of the, you know, families that are currently attending. But the recommendation here would be to move JSTEM from Judson Middle School to Kitty Hawk as a recommendation for the middle schools.
Again, for the sake of time, we didn't speak to all of the other recommendations that it came about for the middle school. One that really we just spent a lot of time talking about was it came up that in an effort to increase capacity at the other 5 middle schools, we could close down one of the middle schools, and that recommendation was Judson Middle. But in speaking with the board, speaking with the cabinet, and with speaking with the directors, it was given to me the feedback that they wouldn't support that, and they felt that we should go in a different direction, because they felt that moving that many students into the elementaries would cause us to split campuses across the district. We wouldn't be able to just put all the students one other place. We'd have to equally distribute them everywhere, which would disrupt the lines going into the high school. In addition, we would create a scenario at the middle school level. I'm hearing from our curriculum and instruction department and from all of the cabinet that 6th, 7th, and 8th is where we're focusing our efforts in terms of trying to bring up our academic performance, and crowding those students into a campus might not be the best way to go. I'm going to leave it right there, let the cabinet speak a little bit about it before. I'm sure the board would want some feedback, but if I left anything out, feel free.
Dr. Fields, I think you covered everything that needs to be covered, but I do want to remind us that the last group that experienced COVID on our campuses right now is this 5th grade class. So we are getting ready to see some struggles coming up into our middle school 6th, 7th, and 8th, because the kids that are sitting in those classes, the last group in 5th graders this year, when they finish 5th grade, is the last group of kids that experienced COVID, where they were shut down for a year and a half. They didn't have to go to school. So we're getting ready to put that group up into middle school, and we're going to have 3 years with those babies, and we're tracking and we're trending with the data and whatnot to increase the size of a middle school for the next 3 years is something that we cannot do. A school that is at 1,100 or 1,200 is a small high school, to be honest with you. If you look at districts around us, if you're at 1,200, those are like your 3A high schools and whatnot, the numbers that they're looking at right now. And so for knowing, it would not be a wise decision, in my opinion, when you're looking at the data, to take that and make our middle schools bigger than what they are right now. We need to even them out. But even them out means we need to keep all 6. And so that we can give our students a fighting chance for the next 3 years, or the next 4 years.
The transition from 5th grade to 6th grade is already difficult.
Yes.
So if you're talking about leaving a campus of 600 as a 5th grader and going to a campus of 1,200 as a 6th grader, all that does is compound the issues with that transition. So I agree with Mary. I definitely would not recommend that.
And 7th grade is already rough.
Correct. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is where we should be focusing our attention around the whole child.
Yes.
And that is very difficult to do when you're talking about 1,200 kids in a building.
And I would also say historically, the last several years, we were losing more students at the 6th or 8th grade level than we lose anywhere else when we lose students that leave the district. We oftentimes see them come back when they get to high school, but we lose them after that 5th grade, number one, due to that transition, but also just the size of what happens to that campus. So increasing that number, I would hate to see us lose some additional students just based on having, going from a campus with, 500, 600 students to double that size in a single year.
Thank you.
Just one thing, Dr. Fields, let's assume that we talked about closing a middle school. All those students would transition to other middle schools. What happens to the capacity for growth there?
It limits it. It limits it.
How quickly would we need portables or to open up another school again?
I would say in the course of about 3 to 4 years, we would be at a point where I asked Mr. Brooks to calculate 3 years out. And he could give some rudimentary numbers based on the demographer's projections, but what would it be? I mean,
So for Kirby, at the 3-year mark, which would be 2027, we would be looking at about 961 kids. Cibolo Creek, we would be at about 706. Kitty Hawk, we would be at 871. Metzger, about 1,100. Woodlake Hills Middle School, 980.
no, we're talking about 3 years out.
Yeah,
That's
no,
right.
I'm saying his projection's 5 years out, didn't say that.
No. That's if we were to close down
If we
Judson
were to
Middle
close down
and
Judson
disperse
Middle.
those students. Yeah, just if we were to close down Judson Middle, disperse the students, add those equally, and just adding those equally across the district, because if you close down Judson Middle, I don't know how you raise Kitty Hawk an equitable number of students without now disrupting the lines. I mean, not Kitty Hawk, but Kirby, because that's so far away without disrupting the lines somewhere else for one of, you know what I'm saying?
So one of the charges that we heard clearly from the community was about safety and security, and safety also includes the population at a campus. Large numbers of students, particularly at middle school when adolescence is beginning, and we know, we know what those kiddos can be like. Larger numbers cause more problems, and so that's always a concern and something that I keep in the back of my mind as well.
Salinas.
I'm going to speak as a taxpayer. Okay? A couple of years ago, came around and said we need a bond so we can build another middle school. To close a middle school? That would not be good for the community. I guarantee you, and I would fight for it. You asked us, you needed the money, we passed the bond. Now you're saying, oh, you know what, we might close one when we're just building a middle school. That would not look good to the taxpayers. Thank you.
So I've been in all of the growth and planning, so I have all the demographer numbers, and I'll let it go on closing an elementary school or repurposing one of those, but I am very concerned data-wise about the middle school situation, because the demographer is predicting 5-7 years out we will never have more than 5,000 middle school students in all of Judson ISD. That's going to be 3,000 empty seats at schools. And while smaller may feel better, it's not what everyone else around us is doing. If you go pull up all of our surrounding districts, the middle school size for our 3 surrounding districts is 1,100 to 1,400 at almost every single middle school. This plan will drop on average our 6 middle schools to 800. That is 400 to 600 less than every district around us. So when I see our budget deficit as a bigger percentage of our budget than our surrounding districts, we're talking about going out for a voter tax increase next year. And I have people asking me, how are you going to ask us for more tax money if you all have not done what you can do to be efficient? The utilization rate with this plan too is going to be 62% utilization of our middle schools. 62%. The taxpayers are not happy about that. And it's very easy for me to explain why we had to build a new middle school was simply geography. We have the worst shaped district of anybody out there. And the growth and everything was in one area, and the shrinking is occurring in other areas. So we geographically needed a middle school up in the northern feeder pattern desperately. But to go out to taxpayers and tell them we're going to sit at 62% capacity, and I'm not worried about splitting middle schools into 2 high schools. I've lived all over the country, and it happens everywhere. There's school districts that do that all the time. Everybody leaves at 8th grade, and half of them head one direction, half head the other. We have school of choice in high school anyway, so people disperse from our middle schools anyway. But 5 middle schools would put 1,000 on average, depending on how you draw the lines, 1,000 in each of our middle schools, which would still put us 100 to 400 smaller than every middle school around us. Dobie, Legacy, all of those schools that we play in sports, by the way, that we compete at middle school level, and we're picking from 800 kids, not that we want to make any decisions off of sports, which is not a good choice. But the course, what I see as things get smaller is I see course offerings drop. That's what I see happening, where all of a sudden certain classes are only offered at certain schools. And that's less educational opportunities. And somebody asked if bigger is better. For students, sometimes it is, because now you have more efficiencies. Now you have a lot more to work with. There are more RTI facilitators, there are more paras, and you have this flexibility to move people around because there are more people on that campus for you to flex with and do creative things with. As you draw down your FTEs, less and less FTEs, you end up with less flexibility. So from both an academic offerings standpoint and a financial and following our board goal, 62% was not our board goal for capacity.
Again,
I just don't know how we're going to sell it to the taxpayers if we don't do something about the middle school situation.
Yes, I just want to say on the 62%, that's based on Judson Middle being at 1,700 capacity. I keep repeating, you can't put 1,700 kids in a middle school. That's.
You can, you just don't want to. I'm saying there's enough classrooms, and what they see is classrooms. Like literally how many chairs, if everything hits the fan in education, right? Literally how many things meet the specifications that it is a classroom where you can put a teacher and 22, 23, 24 kids. And technically, we have that many classrooms that a great teacher can be in and can teach. But I bet it doesn't middle school. I know how many rooms there are there and what they're being used for. And I've been
We don't have the capacity for 17.
I can tell you, I was just at Judson Middle. I walked the building because I was there for a curriculum reason. But I walked the building. I'm in rooms where there's not enough room for the big middle schoolers that we have. There's not enough room for them to move around. The teacher was trying her very best to get them to do a out-of-seat activity where they were going from station to station, and everybody was bumping into, I got bumped into, the person I was walking with got bumped into because there's not enough room. You have to also look at the fact that, again, every school that is around us is going to get hit with a tsunami when these fifth graders get ready to come in, because we're getting ready to handle learning at a different level than what we've been seeing. It's going to crest at this point. And so I can't, we sit in these board meetings and we say we want to look at other districts and tout what other districts are doing, and then we come back and say, we're Judson ISD and we do Judson ISD. I've been in Judson ISD year 24. Year 24. I have seen what big looks like. We had Judson High School. 5,000 kids is not an ideal number unless you have the building to house that many in the number. But we're also, want to talk about budgets. We don't have the money to add more teachers, to add more pairs, to add all these other things to it. We are trying to come out of a deficit that is not of our making for the most part. The state needs to come through, but we don't even know what that's going to look like until the legislation opens in January. And then we got to go through 6 months of them going back and forth and arguing before we even see a dime, maybe in June, if we're lucky. Probably August or September. But what I want to say is that we're making decisions based on suppositions. We're making decisions based on what people are not looking at all the facts, and we got to be very, very careful about that. The demographer's there, he gave us projections. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. That I know for a fact, because we didn't even expect COVID to hit us and put us in the pandemic that we were in that time, during that time frame. So we have to act on, for me, it's always what's best for kids. Middle school's hard. High school is hard. Yes, we would love to offer a lot of different things. I would love to have Spanish 1, 2, and 3 at the middle school level. You know what the problem is? There are no Spanish teachers. I would like to have units at every school to service the needs instead of busing kids from one side of the district to another because I have an Apple unit at this. I would love to offer that at every, you know what the problem is? We don't have SPED teachers. So we can keep talking about what we can staff at other schools. We can keep talking about what we can do and how we can increase numbers at our campuses and the capacity. I want us to be cognizant of the fact, until we find out what's going to go on with our money, until we can find out what the state is going to do and the federal government is going to do about all these certifications that they're holding our feet to fire about, we have got to do what's best for our students. And that is what we're trying to propose tonight. I will stop.
Ms. Faulkner, who's next?
So I just want to clarify. This is the recommendation of a committee that has been meeting for, I don't know, the whole year, all right?
About 3-4 months.
Yeah. And so this is their committee work. Their job is to bring it to the board. We're also hearing from the cabinet, who are the experts that we have as a board chosen to be the experts to run this district, and we're putting our faith in them. So what I'm hearing, this recommendation that isn't even on here, I can't. I don't know where to go with it, because to me, that's kind of a slap in the face. Because that's telling everybody who went to all those meetings and did all that work, and everybody sitting here who has had input into this and done this research, that it really doesn't matter. Here's what we'd rather do.
Dr. Fields, there was a comment made that I want to make sure I put out there a response to. As a middle school principal, 1,700 students in a school, as a principal, as an administrator, as a teacher in a building with 1,700 middle school students is not wise, would not be safe. The comment was made that it's not that we can't, it's that we don't want to. My comment would be that we shouldn't. Just because we can doesn't mean that we should, because it would not be what's best for students to have 1,700 students in a building to try and teach. We would have large classroom sizes. You're just introducing issues that you just cannot plan for. And so, again, my recommendation would not be to have that large of a campus with that number of students on it.
The reason why I brought that up is because if you were to take those 1,700 seats that we're talking about and decrease it to 1,100, then the capacities go up. But when you add those 600 seats onto it, then it looks like 62%. But take those away to a reasonable 1,100, then now the capacities that we have versus seats versus students goes up all the way around. So it's not 62%. But I digress, Mr. Macias.
Well, thank you. It's hard to keep quiet when you want to say, so I know how you feel too. But a couple of things, and you'll find in my remarks that I agree with some of what Ms. Faulkner said and some with Ms. Ryan, but then I also disagree with them. So we're supposed to have this healthy discussion. So the first thing I'll say is, again, the Growth and Planning Committee was majority employees, in my opinion. So the feedback we received from them is great, and Ms. Faulkner are our experts that we hear from. But the board reflects the whole value of our district. And so if we're going to weigh in, we're weighing in now on that feedback and concerns, naturally, because the staff, some may not even live in our district, or they may live in different areas. This is where we hear from everyone at this point. So I appreciate that comment, but also just know this is where we got to listen to things. So the other thing to say is that I don't agree with Ms. Ryan on the idea of trying to reduce the middle school. I agree with everyone here. We want to keep it minimum, but there's going to be an expectation of better academic outcomes. We're not going to make this investment and then not see any improvement in grade level attainment. Then we've certainly not done our job. And I know that our curriculum people, our staff, we want all the same thing, but we need to do that. So I will support the recommendation because I'm in a belief. I'm working with middle school students in the West Side, all middle school students, and the number one issue is they feel lost, they don't feel seen. We need to see and we need to connect with them because they need to feel supported and loved. So bottom line is I'm expecting us to continue the strategy of lower student-teacher ratios. I bet you, Ms. Ryan's point about other districts having more, I bet you they would love to be in our position to have 800 students. They would just want to be here because we're supposed to delivering academic outcomes. So that's overrides efficiency. Academic output is more important than efficiency in the building, in my opinion. If we had to have one, if you had to give me one, which one would you want? I want all academic students. But also keep in mind, Dr. Toppin, we've had struggles with grade level attainment prior to the pandemic. We were already having challenges. Parents look at records and they look at taper reports and they hear from other parents and they make choices based on that. So we still have to really focus on how we're going to break through. And that's important. And then again, I just want to reiterate that we need to also include Boys and Girls Club, which was eliminated in 2018, 2019 from middle school. We need to bring back organizations and nonprofit partnerships in our middle school because we need more support. And I know a number of nonprofits who have reached out saying we want to be a part of the help, but there's no synergy, nothing's happening. So we need to connect with them in order to help our students. And right now, I think I had a parent tell me they drive to the middle school and all these kids are just sitting on the curb. They could be engaged in something that could be helpful for their academic success. And then again, I guess I look at this as an opportunity. We have a district that's roughly 75% economically disadvantaged. So we have real issues with poverty, meaning students need more support. So smaller classrooms will, in my opinion, work. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes. Just for the other board members, sorry, I've been on growth and planning or whatever it was called since 2018. But just, if you didn't get a chance, the other board members, to go watch the video, just so you know what the makeup of the growth and planning and what was presented to them. So the option or anything related to, the only thing presented for middle school was whether or not to move JSTEM or not. That was what was voted on. Additionally, the composition of the growth and planning changed drastically just the last two meetings. There is a core group of a dozen, parents and people who have been part of this for years and years and years. The last two meetings became primarily Coronado Village between the staff and the community members, and then largely the cabinet, the principals, executive directors, and directors. So just so the board knows, when this vote occurred on these courses of action, because the questions I'm bringing up, these were brought up by many of the original committee members, not the people who joined recently. The majority of the votes on any of these courses of action were levied from either Coronado Village staff, Coronado Village neighbors, members of the cabinet, and principals. That's where the majority of the hands were. There were only about 10 of the original committee members that were there out of the, was it 70 or so votes that were levied maybe at the last meeting. So I just want to make clear that there was nothing presented about this, though there was no vote about closing a middle school or anything like that. That was presented at that meeting.
None of the cabinet members voted, ever. You can ask them right now if you'd like, but none of the cabinet members voted.
I did forget one thing, Ms. Kenoy, my apologies. It's my biggest note, and I forgot to say it, so let me just say it. About accessibility. Kitty Hawk is a great location potentially for the STEM, but JSTEM was identified because it was closer for those students in the Kirby area and so forth on the southern end. Will Kitty Hawk be a potential barrier to that accessibility?
We'll bus. We will be busing. We bus currently, and Kirby has a STEM program as well.
Now, we've talked a little bit about the distinction of those programs. Kirby STEM is not the same as JSTEM, right? They're different?
No, sir.
Because I'm under the impression.
Well, I can
Kirby's
say
gonna be
there
all
is a
STEM.
difference. There's a difference.
Yeah.
The difference is Kirby's entire campus will
Exactly.
be STEM, whereas JSTEM is a selected group.
So are we going to, well, I won't even ask that question. But bottom line is that difference. I've obviously seen parents and they apply and all that kind of stuff. There's sort of an attractiveness of this rigorous program in JSTEM, and we've had great students go through it through JECA and so forth. But again, my concern is we still want that program available to, again, the southern end of the district if they want to attend JSTEM. And I just need to know that when we put it at Kitty Hawk, if 90% of the students won't be from Kitty Hawk. That's sort of what I'm talking about in accessibility as we're looking at our entire district
I will
and
tell you that
accessibility.
there's a lottery that has to take place. You apply,
Okay.
yes. But there's a lottery, so you can't just say all the kids at Kitty Hawk will be the kids that will be.
There's so many kids from each campus, boy
They each,
and girl.
13 girls, 13 boys from each of the feeder campuses. The other thing from the elementaries, the other thing I would like to say is that JSTEM is one of the campuses that I go frequently to and have conversations with. I just had conversations even today. They really would like their own building. Moving it to Kitty Hawk would give them an opportunity to be housed in a building that is for them. And so that's one of the things that we heard loud and clear. And we heard it just this evening at
And
So.
our superintendent employee committee, one of the representatives was from JSTEM and said that they were looking forward to the move.
Well, I know they have their own area. I've attended the JSTEM, and they seem pretty secluded out there. Eventually, if we're talking dreams, I would like a state-of-the-art STEM academy built as a future project in our bonds, but that's in the future.
Yes, sir.
And so, again, my only concern is accessibility. I want to ensure that if there's Kitty Hawk students that want to go to Kirby, they would go to Kirby, and vice versa. And moving it from Judson Middle School up the road isn't crazy, but you already answered my question when you said you bus them. I just want to make sure that accessibility.
Do we currently bus the JSTEM? They currently bust, right? Mr. Johnson? You the bus guy. Do we bus the JSTEM students? Okay, thank you.
All right, that's it, thank you.
The last thing is the recommendation on the high school. Very simplistic. It seemed like it was truly about maintaining the numbers where, I'm sorry, I'm just going through it real quick, but it's truly about maintaining the numbers where Judson could be the 6A, Wagner could be a large 5A, and Veterans could remain a small 5A. By moving Park Village into the Woodlake Hills middle school feeder pattern and sending those students then to Judson would allow us to maintain that same number of students at the high school level. So we don't find, and to Ms. Ryan's point, this isn't about sports, it's just about UIL activities. We don't want to create a scenario in our district, if we don't have to, where for Judson to be successful, Wagner has to lose. Or Wagner to be successful, they have to beat Judson. Or with veterans. This allows all of them to participate in a different UIL category, and they can all go on to be state championships without having to go through one of the other schools in the district, because we have so few. Was there anything to add to that, Mr. Brooks?
That was pretty much it, sir.
So those would be the recommendations that we're bringing to the board, ones that, yes, ma'am, we can.
Sorry, this one got me quite a few messages from people who watched the video. Is that obviously, you know, our extracurricular UIL activities are not about winning rings and championships, right? It's about growing great human beings who have safe places with adults, and whether that's bowling or football or band or orchestra or whatever that is, you know, we don't measure that on the number of rings that we get each year. And so the concern is watching one high school getting drawn down to somewhere near the 1,400 student mark, and what that means to academic offerings. Because Veterans Memorial is already struggling to get classes to make. It's hard to get AP classes to make, to get dual credit to make. It doesn't have a T-STEM, it doesn't have a P-TECH, it's got some CTE pathways, but it's nowhere near as robust as the other two high schools. And that is a major concern for parents in that feeder pattern. And we're seeing, normally we see families flood back in high school, right? But we're not seeing, those families aren't flooding back in high school as much anymore up in the veterans feeder pattern, because the offerings are just not robust up in the northern end of the district. So to draw down even further the enrollment at veterans is only going to shrink those offerings, especially in the advanced academics arena for those students up there. And that's very concerning, because creating, you know, these educational equity scenarios, because again, geography is not our friend. Okay, to ask, you know, someone like me to send my child to JISD or to T-STEM, I can't be driving to Wagner to pick her up from soccer every day, right? Like, that is a burden on parents of having some of these geographically dispersed things. And I know we can't have everything everywhere, but having something in every area, because working parents just can't commit to some of these drives, and then students are missing out on programs and missing out on credits. I mean, our dual credit enrollment is so low compared to our surrounding districts, and if I see that shrink even more at veterans, that is very concerning that we're going to start. And even some of the CTE programs, right, they're already seeing some decreases. You know, computer science is worried about having enough kids and everything else. So I would prefer to see these a little more robust at every school, so that we can have more offerings, because hopefully more offerings will bring more families back. And if we matriculate more people into the high schools, then that'll build everybody's numbers back up. But I'm afraid of watching veterans just continue to shrink and shrink and shrink, because the less we have, the less we're going to offer.
I can.
It's not, I'm.
Okay.
The offerings for dual credit and AP courses is driven by the people that are qualified to teach those classes. In order to teach a dual credit course, you have to be hired by the college in order to
Articulate.
Yes, particularly, you have to have the number of course credit hours in order to teach the course. For our AP classes, you have to go through the process of getting your syllabus accepted by AP in order for you to teach it. The other thing is that if the numbers are not there for a full 6 periods a day to teach that course, you have to share that teacher with other offerings that are also on that campus, which sometimes gets in the way of that. We're seeing kind of a trend right now in the advanced academics, and Jesse, you can correct me if I'm wrong, where a lot of kids are doing AP. For a while, the pendulum has swung the other way, where AP courses were the way to go. But not all colleges are accepting AP scores, whether you passed it or not. You got a 3, 4, or 5, you could get that credit added to your college. Most of the individuals will take it if you're in a school, at a certain type of school, where they'll take it. Also, we're seeing more kids gravitate towards dual credit, which begs us which also offers another issue, because we have to have the qualified teachers to teach it. They have to have the college credit hours in order, the 18 hours that they must have in order to be hired by the university to teach our students in our buildings for it. And so it's more than just, we're not offering the courses. It's having the qualified people in order to teach the course, having the syllabus accepted by the companies that are saying you have to do it our way or no way, and that is a reality in the world that we live in. And then also saying, what is our community asking us to do? So if our kids are looking at, it depends on the university they want to go to, whether or not that university is going to accept those hours, or the dual credit hours, or the AP for you passing I was lucky my daughter chose a school that did accept her AP exam scores, and so she was able to have a head start her freshman year in college. But that is not the case at every school in the state of Texas, nor in every school across the country. So having it is having the qualified staff to do it, and we are bringing in, and I know that Dr. Tagenall can speak to, we're bringing in opportunities for people to earn masters while working in our district, earn masters at a reduced rate, but through partnerships with higher ed around us and whatnot. So we recognize the need to do it. However, there's a plethora of reasons why certain courses are not offered at a campus. And at a high school, as a former high school principal, it's a conversation we have that I'm having right now with our principals getting ready for master schedule 25, 26.
So what I'd say real quick is the number of students doesn't mean the number of offerings. I'd also say over at Veterans Memorial, there are a plethora of CTE programs that they offer. I know about event planning. I know about cybersecurity. They also have the cosmetology. I mean, they have the print shop. There's a bunch of things that students can do it's all about interest. You have to, having been a CTE teacher, if you want people to participate in your elective, you have to go out and attract people to come and put that on their course selection to maintain your program. So it's about how you advertise, not just about putting a bunch of students in the school. In addition, in terms of our capacity or our number of students who are taking GT programs versus surrounding districts, are we lower than the surrounding districts?
We're about half. If you want the numbers, I have them right here. So we only have 10%
I'd rather go with our GT person in the
right
back.
off what you sent me.
Yes, ma'am. I'd rather go with,
Right? That's what you emailed us.
Did
Yeah,
you
go
give
on.
him the question?
Yeah, like straight off a paper, what % of our kids are AP? Because what you sent us said only 10% of our kids pass an AP course before they graduate, and the Region 20 is almost 20%. This is what,
Give me a moment to pull that up.
I thought the question or the statement was that our dual credit enrollment is lower in Judson than other districts.
yes, so dual credits in any subject, we are 11.6, the region is 22.6, the state is 23.6, so we're about half compared to Region 20. Half as many kids complete a dual credit course in any subject. And we have an early college high school. There's districts that don't even have a JECA and are double what our numbers were. Sorry, I only had this pulled up because we're going to get to his program review, so. I'm previewing all my questions for program review.
All right. So for AP, the number for 2022, 2023 for the district is 10%. It's 19% for Region 20.
And then the state's 20.4, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But we were talking
So we're
about
half.
the region. The region. You were
Yeah,
just talking about the region.
19.5 and 10.1. All right, so 48%. Not
Correct.
Okay. And then your dual credit, any subject, I have 11.6, and the region is 22.6,
Correct.
and then the state is 23.6. So about roughly half. Okay. That's what I'm saying, is we're, you know, I have my own kids who have not been able to get into classes of Veterans Memorial because the classes don't make, and that was with 1,700 students. So
Oh, I too.
if they go
I had a
down-
daughter graduate from there and could not get into the
Correct, she
same
couldn't
class.
get AP government. Yes,
And they didn't
exactly.
make a class for her, so she
Exactly.
just didn't get
So
it.
if those go down another 300 students, I'm worried what then becomes of those offerings. And if you end up with things where, like, some things are so specialized that if you don't have a full class schedule of 6 classes, well, what are you going to do? We can't hire a teacher just to teach 2-3 classes, you know,
But
that's,
it's not about the numbers, it's about the interest.
In addition to that, if I may add, one of the things that we just recently discussed in Cabinet this past Tuesday is how to ensure that our students, regardless of the geography, regardless of the high school, that we offer the opportunities they're interested in. So it might not necessarily be through a teacher. There are other opportunities, and we actually just had a very robust discussion on that, such as the virtual Texas Network. One of the things we want to do moving forward is that if a class doesn't make, because we're trying to be at the same time, you know, we're trying to meet all of these standards, be fiscally responsible, ensure there is a teacher. We're trying to be fiscally responsible. We even threw out certain numbers and for which classes to make. But if they don't make, then what are we going to do to ensure that the student still receives the opportunity and the class they're seeking for? So there are other options that I promise you, Ms. Ryan, we are discussing in Cabinet, because we want to make sure that regardless of the changes that we make moving forward, because we're thinking about the money, we're also still ultimately thinking about what we can do for that student. And that was one of the discussions we just recently had. And although I know that you're pointing out dual credit compared to other districts within our region, we are looking forward to presenting in our program review the great advances that we have done in advanced academics. From last year to this year, you're going to see increases in our AP scores. You're going to see increases in the amount of GT referrals and what our AAT teachers are doing for our students right now. So we're looking forward to that opportunity to proudly also share the good things that we're doing despite the constraints that we have. And that's what we plan to do moving forward.
yeah. And I don't want to do anything that's going to make Mr. Holmes's job harder, because I've known him for 6-7 years too. And so I know how hard he works, and I know how far we have come, you know, since I came to this district in 2017. So I don't want any of our courses of action to make those efforts more difficult.
Can I add just a little happy note for you, though? Last year at Veterans Memorial High School, we had 379 enrollments in AP for 237 students. And this year at Veterans, we have 325 students and 501 enrollments. So we have increased our enrollments quite a bit, over 100 for this one, so.
Yeah, I think some of that's due to 7. Is that because we switched to 7 made it a little easier?
I think that they're also making a lot of efforts to grab those kids. AP, and like, one thing Veterans has been doing, because it is an issue, is trying to find creative ways to make AP and dual credit happen more frequently there, because it hasn't been a challenge.
Thank you.
So we've kind of gotten away from what our agenda is. We've had 2 hours of discussion on these recommendations from Growth and Planning. I'd really like to see us get to the program review, because these people have taken time, they've been here, they've been sitting through this, and I'd really like us to move on to that now. And more questions can come up next week when this is on the agenda as well.
We will move
So-
directly to program reviews.
Thank you.
So first up is going to be facilities planning. And Mr. Brooks, I'd ask you to go.
Transportation.
They can do whatever order.
Well, I'd ask for a little bit of discretion here. I'd rather have facilities, maintenance, transportation, child nutrition go. Then we'll have them relocate and we'll bring up human resources so they could go, and then they'll relocate and CCMR can come. That way we don't have people going up there, getting down, and so I apologize.
That's just how it was listed on the agenda. That doesn't mean we have to take it in that order.
Yes, ma'am. Let's move.
I don't think it's on.
Let's try it. There you go. Good evening, all. Facilities planning. So in front of you, you have our sheet. For this 24-25 school year, we'll be asking for $60,000 for our budget. Our target population is, of course, our staff and our students. And we are to create a positive and engaging instructional environment suitable for all. We have a couple of strategies that I would like to touch base with you to continue to accelerate the implementation of all the projects for 2016 bond and 2017 remaining projects as well. As you know, those are funded through the 2016-2017 bond. We are also working on the 22, but that's a separate line item. We also, key strategy number 2 is to continue to work with the staff and the demographer for the future of the facilities and maintenance throughout the district, and continue to coordinate with the bond oversight committees and the growth and planning committees. Excuse me. Key strategy number 3 is also, of course, working with the 22 bond and fast-tracking a lot of those design projects. Of course, right now, we currently have the fencing in the gymnasium, HVAC, that are taking off in construction. One thing that was not noted here, and I would like to also identify, is that we're currently, and I believe we have something on the agenda for this coming week, is approval for the teams that will be working on the controls parts and some of the chillers, some of the boilers. So we're continuing to work on Bond 22. And I just want to point out that some of those will be touching base on the scorecard. For example, the 4.3, which once we complete controls, that builds into the efficiency of the building. Next item would be, currently we have completed about 97% of Bond 2016. And want to remind everybody that we had about 200 projects, individual line items on 2016. And we are substantially complete with Bond 2017, I'm sorry. And item number 2, we continue to meet with the various different committees and try to also assist with the forecasting of where this district is going to go, beyond the 24 and 25 school year. One of the things also, item number 3, Judson has hired an engineering firm to assist the district in prioritizing. Actually, that was a typo. It's supposed to be an architectural firm. To prioritize the projects for the gymnasium and the fencing out of Bond 22. And the district-wide perimeter fencing and the gates projects, Phase 1 is already substantially complete. Phase 1 and 2 construction of the district-wide gym HVAC has already begun as well. And I'm open for any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Is one of the fencing projects going on at Coronado right now? Because I had a question about that.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. It was one of the community members that just wondered why we were building a fence if we were considering not using the school, but we're already under contract for that.
That is correct, ma'am.
That's also, Ms. Stewart, if I could say, when we, even if we repurpose the facility based on safety and security guidelines, we need the fence around the facility anyway, especially if we were going to potentially place students there in any capacity, the fencing must be there.
Just one quick thing to add to the facilities and planning piece. We are also engaged with companies, architectural firm, to do the long-range facility assessments so that we can do a plan for any preventative things, any things that we need to replace. We're currently on the contract with companies to come up with a prioritization plan for that. So just wanted to add that.
Good evening. The maintenance department is comprised of maintenance, custodians, and energy management. 2 years ago, the amended maintenance budget was at $4.6 million. Last year, the amended budget was $5 million, and this year to date, it's at $3.8 million. And so we're going to be requesting additional funding in order to complete out this coming year. Key strategies. Last year, when Wagner High School, when the bus bar for transformer number 1 was damaged, the contractor noticed that repair needed to be made to bus bar for transformer number 2. However, the part would not be able to come in within last year. So the part just came in this year, and we were able to make, we're going to make the repair this year, on this fiscal year, and that's going to be at $46,000. Key strategy number 2, currently we're using temporary chillers at a couple of our campuses because we're having issues with the chiller units as right now. Spring Meadows, we had to use a temporary chiller for 3 months until we're able to make the repairs. And at Miller's Point, we are still currently using a temporary chiller and expected to use it until that chiller unit is replaced. Key strategy number 3, at this time we have some major unexpected repairs. To give example, Wagner High School, when the vandalism occurred and the windows, 28 windows were broken, we had to replace those windows, and that was at a cost of $27,000. And so, in addition, we've had to rebuild a chiller, we've had to replace piping going up to the chiller, and also make structural repairs to the chiller itself. And we spent over $119,000 at Wagner just on a couple of those projects right there. At Wood Lake Hills, we've spent $86,000 doing repairs to air handler motors, repairs to air handlers themselves, and replacing compressors, just to give you an idea of what we've done. For support, we are asking, the maintenance department is asking that we can replace 2 of the 20-year-old chillers at Miller's Point, and that's estimated at $750,000. And at Metzger Middle School, which is estimated at $1.25 million, and that's for 2.5 chillers. Maintenance is also asking for additional funding for unexpected expenses based on the facilities assessment. And we're hoping to get $1.5 million for that. The custodial department is requesting additional funding of $120,000, and that's for increased pricing on equipment, supplies, and the 2 new schools that are being built that'll be open next year. And something that's not on here, I'd like to make a note also. Our energy management department has been doing a lot of work with vendors and getting rebates for light fixtures and lighting projects. and they've been working with CPS, and next month the CPS will be issuing a check to Judson ISD for $151,000. So, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I know and congratulations on the CPS. I like when CPS comes and gives us money. Yeah. I know we've discussed a couple of times about having a life expectancy chart of, like the chillers and different things like that. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you have it already?
Well,
Working on it.
that's a facilities assessment, is that correct? Yes, ma'am.
That seems like we've been there.
Facilities assessment.
Correct.
Yes, talking about chillers?
No, we're talking.
Not just the chillers, I'm talking,
Oh, yes.
Priority plan.
The different things that they will be looking at, they will
Right.
let us know what the
the
lights
roofs,
are,
the lights,
Yes, ma'am.
water heaters, and all that.
compressors, all of that.
And I noticed the kids somebody, I can't say it's the kids, has already like torn down, not the fence at Judson High School, over there on the theater side. I guess they didn't want to walk around and, so, have we looked at that?
So yes, ma'am, so as they are damaged, we are continually having to replace those and make repairs to those as well.
Yeah. Is there a way we can make a walkway or something so they can, because I
So,
see what they're
I
doing.
know
It's
at-
just that,
I know at
we got to
campuses-
keep replacing it.
Correct. I know at some of the campuses, they have pedestrian walkways, but I think where the students come in from, it's not accessible to be able to put a walkway there because it's so far away from the campus itself.
Right.
And it would compromise the security of the campus. I mean, the point was to put.
So we just going to keep just replacing it every time they tear it up.
Charging parents.
Okay. Hey,
Maybe we put a camera.
So,
yeah, put a camera.
I would caution, with a new presidential administration coming in, the idea of tariffs is going to have an impact on the materials that we're trying to get and those prices. So anything that we can do sooner rather than later, let's keep that in the back of our mind. I'm not, we don't know what's going to happen with that yet, but that opportunity is there.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, yes. Just wanted to make a comment about the fencing, because I guess, I just have to say, the access at Judson has been really difficult. And so we've lost something. I don't know what we've gained for that. It would seem to me it might make it harder for people to leave. It's just hard to gain access to the school at different times for meetings after school. It was hard to find parking. Honestly, I went up the wrong way on purpose to just get into the parking area because otherwise it was all blocked off. So are we about to continue that? Are we about to do that again at Veterans? And is there any way to improve that situation? Since we're on it, I'm just going to bring it up, that I've been to a couple meetings at the Judson High School and almost feel like it's not a good place to have a meeting. Because it's, even our guests, we had a hard time gaining access and parking, so.
I think what happened is that individual principals are coming up with their procedures or how they're going to, give access to the campus. I think what needs to happen is we just need to come up with a standardized plan, and that's what we were going to be talking about doing. You had something?
We actually have a standard district plan for how the fencing is supposed to be monitored, and it was voted on by the Safety and Security Committee originally, so it is in the district employee manual. The gates are to remain locked during the school day. We do lock them at night, but there are only certain gates that are accessible accessible to the public. And so perhaps what needs to happen is maybe some additional communication in terms of where you actually enter the campus versus not entering the campus. And maybe we've added signage and whatnot to the different fencing areas so that people know where you can't come in and where you cannot come in. But perhaps we need some additional signage on that. But it does have to do, we are required to have them, and when we have the gates, we are required to have them locked, especially while students are there at the, on site and at the campus. It has changed some of our traffic patterns just based on that. We have not completed the full cycle, so right now, because some of the campuses have fences and some of them do not, as Mr. Brooks said, the principals do have the discretion to decide whether or not to unlock or relock a gate based on events that are taking place. But during the school day, they are in fact locked. We do lock them overnight, and we will continue to evaluate that and look at it. But it is based on a safety measure that is there. But we have taken it to the District Safety and Security Committee in order to develop that part of the project.
I would just like to suggest that a phone number is added, so that, because Laura and I had, a devil of a time riding around Judson High School, because that little area by the flagpole, I mean, it was packed full, so there was nowhere to park. I don't even know where we ended up at, but it ended up having to come backwards. Yeah, we double park, which is fine, because I'm all for keeping our kids and our faculty, everybody safe. But if they could put a sign up, as you said, but add a phone number so you can call somebody and say, hey, I'm trying to get into the school, maybe, and they can give us some instructions or something. But yeah, that was a very interesting day. I think we were late.
Yeah, that was for the fundraiser.
Yes, for the fundraiser. Get it in, or lunch, getting lunch.
Yeah, I think the issue is just having sufficient guest parking for the traffic of parents and other things in a day. And I'm watching the fences go up at Veterans. I'm like, I don't know where I'm gonna park. I don't know what's gonna be locked and not locked, so I'll wait in that one seat. But yeah, just high school has 15 guest parking spots now is all you can get to. So I think that's what they were talking about.
Let me just add that at some point, safety, you get a reverse. Because now it's not safe because it's so crowded, emergency vehicles would have a hard time coming in. So now you've just, right.
Well, I think we need to clarify a few things. You're absolutely correct. This is, it's an adjustment. I've been doing this for a long time, and this is the first time I've seen 13 feet fences having to be everywhere based on a state mandate in such a long time. And they're telling us we have to do it. We're at the point now where Mr. Johnson has even came back and said, this is not unlike a ranch, where you have to get off the bus, open the gate, pull your bus through, and then go back and clamp the gate. That's in the summertime. We're getting ready to go into the cold and rainy season. And that turns into a whole different scenario. But this is the requirement that's been put on us. To your point, one of the recommendations that you're gonna see coming up in the next few board meetings is that we have one of these gates that's electronic, where people who have the badges can then have access to scan, and it'll open, then you can go through, and then it'll close back after you go through, based on your scan. But we only have the funding for the 3 comprehensive high schools, because that's mainly where we see that type of traffic going on. At the middle schools and the elementary, they usually bring the kids in, lock it down, and there's not much more going on. So you should see that come up soon as a request. And Mr. Johnson has graciously agreed to take it out of his budget to get that done for the 3 high schools, because it's such a benefit for the transportation department. But as we go through and we see that we may need this for middle school, we may have to come back to the board, and that may be one of the budget concerns that we have going forward as well. So.
Real questions too.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Other than complaining about parking. First, some of these are different than what we have in board book. Could we get the uploaded to board book whatever's up on the screen? Because I do go
We
back
just
and look at
uploaded it,
these.
and it's already there.
Okay, oh, maybe I missed and didn't re-download, so thank you. I'd like to be able to go back and pull these down as we go throughout the year to see what we had said. So there were some changes from 23-24 to 24-25, and I'm wondering what we kind of reduced. So the maintenance budget went from 5 million to about 3.8. Why did that go down so much from last year to this year?
What you see on the first one is the adjusted budget versus the actual budget. It's the amended budget if you go back a slide. And then you'll see amended maintenance budget from 4.6 to 4, and they actually spent 4.3, but all of these started at about 3.6.
3.6.
And then in 23-24, amended budget of 5 million, and they actually spent
You spent like 5 million last year, so I'm worried, how are you going to get by on 3.8 this year? Is there something you're not
Again,
doing this year?
We start off with 3.8. We come up with the amended budgets because we come back to the board and say, hey, we didn't budget for the chiller going down, but we got to buy one. That's going to be or the electric case getting hit by lightning, or the guy coming through knocking out all the windows. But now that it's happened, we're asking for an amended increase in the budget.
Oh, yeah, but we don't like doing budget amendments. We prefer if we plan for those. So if we have historical information that we spend 5 million or 4 million, it'd be nice if those budgets are, we try and get them as realistic as we can, I think.
We felt the same way after Ms. Stanford's request on, is there any way that we could budget for this? But in hearing what you just, because I want to repeat what was just said, we don't want to have to come back and do the amendment, so we'd ask for you to put that in the budget. So next year, when we increase their budget by 2 million, and you ask, what's this increase for? And we say, in case something happens,
Yeah, you're going to say
we don't
that's
know
the
yet,
maintenance
but
reserve. Yeah.
we're just going to say in
Okay.
case something happens, because we don't have anything to name it yet. And then if it
Well,
doesn't
it's
happen,
unprojected repairs to facilities.
understood.
Oh.
As long as, we will write that down, unprojected repairs to facilities.
But when I
And get
look
you
back
the two
across and I
unexpected
see that you're
Yeah.
always spending 5 million.
Every cabinet member's writing
Write
that
that
down, so
down.
they can add $2 million to their
Correct.
budget and not have to account for it.
And if I always see
until
you
now, we've
spend
been-
5 million and you spend 5 million again on more broken air conditioners,
If
I am
that's what
very
works for the board.
understanding of that.
Yes,
Very
ma'am.
understanding.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that kind of true a custodial budget too? Because did we change anything in the way we do custodial or anything? Because theirs is down like 18% too, from last year to this year.
If we did make some budget cuts across the board, and so some of those included their budget. But I will add to the fact that we are expecting a facilities assessment where we are going to be able to then perhaps anticipate a little bit better, and then prioritize, it will be prioritized, because that's one of the things that Mr. Brooks had mentioned. But also, one of the things that we want to do always is think about how to lessen the impact on the local budget. As was mentioned, the chiller, we are going to look into our 2017 bond to see if we are able to use some of the funds that are still there in order to pay the chillers from there. And so you'll be probably seeing that item.
A few more
come-
resolutions. We just did that on the
Correct.
temporary chiller.
So rather than giving up all the money up front, as we were trying to reduce our budget, knowing that we were coming in with a 36 million and, trying to do all of that, we didn't want to take it out of our local fund.
Yes, but the
yes,
most recent question I asked was custodial.
What-
Why did that one go down?
for the same reason
Less
that,
people? Did we restaff
No,
or
it's
something?
not less people. I can tell you, there's a reason why we went from, let me be transparent. There's a reason why we went from $33 million projected deficit last year to 22. We held everybody's, we really monitored the spending.
Okay.
And as we got to the end of the year, our CFO, Amanda, Finance Department, even all of the departments came back and said, we were able to get through with this amount of money. And we kind of started there this year. Now, we know that we drew the belt close and tight to the waist. So we may have to let it, loosen up a little bit towards the end. But there's a reason why we were able to
Okay,
decrease.
so just a lot of minor efficiencies.
Yes.
Nothing, we didn't change anything major or drastic, just lots of little efficiencies. What other question I have? Oh, have we looked into, because groundskeeping is under your department too, right?
Yes.
The staffing audit had a recommendation that we really look at farming more of that out. That was kind of the direction that a lot of districts were going, because there's a lot of financial efficiencies you can get farming it out, because there are so many landscaping companies. So it's easy to bid it out, and we have people who are doing it for us now, and it's easy. If they don't work out, there's like 50 other companies that I'm sure will be willing to bid on it. So have we looked at all into, because I think they said we only have about a third of ours that is currently contracted out, looking at that other 2/3?
No, I'm going to let you get in, but I think it's more like 2/3 is contracted out.
Correct. Yes,
And
sir.
only a third is kept.
Because
We
the-
only-
okay.
We only
The
kept like
elementaries-
one grounds team here in the district.
The
But
elementaries.
if we were to contract it all out, it's my understanding that now if something comes up, or we have tall grass somewhere, now we got to call somebody to see if they can come over, as opposed to sending our own grounds team.
Correct.
And then I'll leave it to you.
So our elementaries are contracted out, as well as the major port, the middle schools and high schools are done. Our groundskeepers do the athletic fields at the middle schools and the high schools, and that's what they're responsible for, and the surrounding area around there as well. Our grounds department, they do the other facilities.
ERC admin office.
Yeah, the ERC admin office maintenance, but they also do additional work, such as moving furniture
Okay.
and things like that.
Other duties as assigned.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Arredondo would say. Yeah, the last, second to last question I had. So, Mr. Johnson and I'll have the same question for you when we get to your part. One big thing that came up last year were some challenges in finding, excuse me, affordable vehicle insurance, because we were having a lot of vehicle accidents, which kind of increased our premiums. Companies didn't even want to offer us a policy. So what efforts because a lot of the vehicles that are driven are maintenance vehicles. Some of them are buses and some of them are maintenance. What have you guys doing this year, and kind of what are your goals in terms of kind of trying to curb that and getting kind of the number of at-fault accidents down in your department?
So part of our insurance with PCAT is we have access to trainers. And actually, Mr. Johnson also works with them. They've actually come out already a couple of times. They've done training with this department. I actually sat through it with them. And so in an effort to try and reduce the number of accidents that we are having, we are employing this ancillary department from PCAT through our insurance at no cost. Well, not no cost, it's part of our insurance.
Part of your insurance, okay.
For them to come out and provide training for us. And so that's what we're currently doing.
Okay, awesome. No, I'd love to see those numbers down the road then when we go back up for renewal to, and let's make sure we're celebrating, people who are, accident-free, all those things you see in like civilian workplaces a lot, right? Like that's a big deal. Because I drive on 1604 and I have no idea how they drive a bus on 1604 without banging into something. So that's great. What else do you guys feel like you're doing to support the balanced scorecard? I have this question written down for kind of all the departments, because that's our guiding document, right? And while it may not say maintenance department on the scorecard, everybody's got a part of this scorecard. So what do you guys see as kind of your role in next year in kind of helping support those goals?
Maintenance is part on the scorecard, and Mr. Moreno kind of mentioned it, is the long-range facility plan is what's going to drive the majority of facilities and planning and maintenance, because once we get that report and they prioritize the things that we then need to tackle, he'll be intricately involved in getting those things done, hence the reason why we're going to be asking for some money to set aside in preparation for that assessment. Once it gets here, we'll then be using that money then to start tackling the issues. Now, understand, once we get that assessment, we're probably going to have to look at and I know Dr. Fields kind of talked about this, we're not going to be able to do all of that out of local funds.
Oh,
I mean, the things that
no.
we're going to have to tackle, obviously, would probably have to go into a bond of some sort or whatever, but whatever we can do from local funds, whatever the board decides to grant us, we'll be able to then start tackling those, the items that they prioritize.
Yes, all about a priority list.
Yes, ma'am.
Fund it how we can. Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Salinas has wanted me to talk. I see him. I was going to say, I have some real questions. No. What I have to say is really just simple about auditing. And we don't typically audit maintenance because it doesn't come to a threshold of some of the other departments that we spend more money. But I've heard in the past complaints about ordering more supplies than we need. Just, and again, I can't quantify it. I'm just putting out things that I've heard. Other concerns from people have been that they've seen people just sitting in trucks, just kind of just sitting there. And again, I don't know protocols. All I want to know is, what are you doing to audit or police those type of potential issues?
So I will tell you that what may seem like they're sitting in their vehicles, a lot of times on their phones, they have their work orders. And so as they do work orders, they finish them and then they go back to their vehicle and they do make the notes on the work order. They close them out and they exit that. And so we give them time to do that as well. But we also look at the work orders. We do reports, and our supervisors go over the work orders with the employees as well.
Okay, so that's the policing. You would do some of that, just to make sure everyone's in compliance. And then, of course, we've had complaints about the timeliness for filling tickets. People submit multiple tickets, and there's all kinds of reasons why that's happening. But person submits a ticket, teacher or principal or whatnot, is there a timeline in which that needs to be addressed? 24 hours, 48, a week? What's the process?
It's all based on priority, I believe, how we do it. A water leak is different than a faucet that's leaking, but they still respond to it. And what we're trying to do now is we're trying to educate our employees to make notes on the work orders so that when they do leave, whoever put the work order in can receive a note saying, okay, the part was ordered, it's going to be a couple of weeks. And so we're working with our crews to make the notes so that we can have a clear communication with the campuses.
Now, does safety rise to the top? I remember
Definitely.
there was a complaint of a hole in the ground at a playground, and they were submitting orders because this kid could step in that hole and all kinds of. So is there a way for these work orders to be prioritized from the individual submitting it?
Our supervisors review them. We review them. Every week we get together, and the supervisors do review the work orders as they come in, and they prioritize them. Safety would be the top. Yes, sir.
And I would tell you also, Mr. Macias, something like that, the principals know they can call me and say, hey, Brooks, I need this done now. I am getting the work order in. I call Chris and say, hey, they're putting the work order in, that this is something that we need to get on right now. And so we take care of it. So I always let the principals know if it's something that's that egregious, then yeah, they can just pick up the phone and call me and we'll get it taken care of. That's not the norm, but if it's something that's definitely need to be taken care of, so.
All right, well, thank you.
But to reiterate, and you're talking about Shaw, I was there when that happened. Sometimes they say there's a hole in the grass, but then when they send you the picture, and you're talking about an elementary school, and it's 5 foot deep, well, I didn't get that from your description on the work order. I just got there was a hole in the grass. But then now when you show that there's a cavern that a student could, okay, stop the press. We got to go over there right now. Yeah. Yes.
Well, and I guess that just goes to my point. How is this being scrutinized so that we are timely? Employee who submit that may think, well, where are the folks? So obviously we're not doing day-to-day management stuff. But if I hear a parent call me, obviously I'll tell Dr. Fields and we'll move down the line. But I want our employees to feel that they are being heard and being responded to, and that we're going to address it. Perhaps is a communication sent to them? We'll be there on X date. We'll be there in a week, we'll be there in 2 days, anything like that submitted back to the respondent who submitted the ticket? Okay, so it'll be coming.
Are there things that you just say, we're not going to fix it? Because I had a teacher write to me about some blinds that were broken in her room, and she kept putting in a request and was finally told, and I can find out where it was. I can check my email because I didn't come prepared for that, but I'll check on it. But she tells me she was told that that was not a priority, it was not going to be taken care of.
We get requests, and sometimes we have to review them to see if we can make the repair. Sometimes it's a larger repair that's outside of our budget, and so we have what we call a minor project construction report, and it'll take more out of the budget. So we work with facilities in determining if it's something we can do. So.
So blinds, are we
Blinds,
willing?
no, ma'am. Blinds, we look at, and like I said, the supervisor goes over it, and they will determine what it is. But for blinds, we usually replace them, yes, ma'am.
We do? Okay,
We should.
I'll get back to her then.
Mr. Johnson.
Well, good evening. I think Dr. Fields told me that the gates are going to have Mr. Johnson electric gates on it.
Dedicated. With your phone.
No.
As long as he cuts one of his personal checks.
No, I think I have some good news for the board about transportation that I'd like to share. And if you look at the budget, what we had for transportation in 2022 and 23, our budget was $1,969,205. We spent $1,457,801. In 2023-24, my budget was $2,006,221. We spent $1,649,514. The 2024-25 budget is $1,900,000. So I think that was good there. For the target population, the transportation department, we support the student providing transportation to and from school for those who live 2 miles away, and for all the other student populations. We provide buses for the athletic events, UIL events, and extracurricular trips. In addition, transportation repairs all the district vehicles except for the maintenance department, which they do their own maintenance there. So some of the strategies that I'm excited about and has really helped us here is that all the 14 passenger buses have been delivered, and they were paid through the ESSER funds. These are what we call the multi-purpose vehicles. Used as the little small buses that you see running around all over the place now. And so we have 25 of them now in the district, in which 17 are used for routes. The 2022 bond for $3 million for buses, we've already received 1577 passengers that were delivered back in late May and June. So those have been being used quite a bit. The next 9 77 passenger buses will be delivered sometime probably in May. And that'll be all the buses for the bond money. The implementation of the electric school bus attendance for students, which allow for electronic attendance on the buses for bus riders, is working very well. It's in all the buses, and we already had that when we purchased the system back in 2020. With the addition of the results right now, with the addition of the 8 type buses or the multi-person buses, we were able to reduce the number of drivers needed that had CDLs, because those buses, you don't require a CDL license. So I can say to you that in the San Antonio area, we're the only school district that we have a driver for every route. Just want to let you know, that's a big thing. That does not mean we don't need any more, okay? Okay, but there's been a lot of things we've done to make that happen, but it's a good thing to be there. The 1577 passenger buses we bought have the underneath storage, and it also has the inside storage inside the buses. And I was working with Mr. Witt on the number of trips he had this year for the band. And the problem with the trips nowadays in the football games is they've moved the games sometimes earlier than normal. So we were not able to get to be able to do the buses. So he was having to charter buses at $1,500 a whack. So we did some tweaking on our bus routes where I had 6 drivers that were able to come in anywhere from 4 o'clock to do these trips. So we saved Fine Arts close to $50,000 in that right there. So that was a good news to me. So I'm requesting, as we move on here, that we begin a bus replacement program. And I was wanting to start off with buying 2 buses, which they're about $130,000 right now. And so that'd be about $270,000 that we'd need for this next year. And 2 reasons why we want to do that is, number one, the cost keeps going up. One vendor brought me a show bus to show me it was $165,000. So the price keeps going up. And the other thing is that it takes about 1 year and 3 months to receive a bus after you order it. So we need to start having a way that we're continually getting buses in for that. And the second thing is looking at getting a bus simulator. And we've talked about the accidents and things of that sort there. There's the trucking company in today's time uses bus simulator or truck simulators, and they have reduced accidents by 26% by having those. And this is a machine or a deal that looks just like you're getting into the cockpit of the bus. I mean, it even seat belt, same seat, and it looks like all the windows in it. It's a computer program, brings all different kinds of scenarios, so it's going to be excellent for training our new drivers. And also for the driver, no matter how an accident, we can do refresher training, and it also grades you too, so we can bring our drivers throughout the year. Let's see how you're doing. There may be some areas that you're not doing so good in. So I think this would be a good tool in reducing the accidents by having this here, because we're constantly be training our drivers. So, any questions?
How long would it take to get your bus simulator?
How long does it take to get new buses?
How long would, on the bus simulator, how soon could you get it?
If we order today, it takes 3 months for them to build it.
I think that's a great idea, so thank you.
Will we get any type of discount on our insurance?
Possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know.
It's possible. I know in the trucking industry, they do get discounts. I'm not sure yet about our insurance company yet, but I have mentioned it to them.
We would have to reach out to our insurance company to find out if that's something that they offer.
That'd be cool, you know, get a little break on that.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm wondering if bus replacement could be part of the facilities planning, the overall report that we're going to get, because that's an expense that we're looking to, it's an ongoing.
That's not part of the scope of work for the contract that we're under right now. It was facilities, not for transportation.
Or can we add that? Because that's a cost we have to plan for, it sounds like.
We could ask to see if that's something that they're even capable of doing. We can ask.
But I don't know that we necessarily need a company to do that. We have,
Right, that's what I'm
we have
thinking, we
Mr.
add it.
We have Mr. Johnson, who knows how many buses and how old they are and projections like that. I'm not sure we need to hire a company
No,
to come in and tell us that.
what I'm saying-
But you're saying attach it as
Yes.
an adjunct to, when we're looking at
Yes.
facilities, look at that additionally.
Yes, I
But
am.
not coming from that company that's doing the facilities. plan.
Yes, I don't
Got it.
care who does it. I'd rather not pay someone to do
Well,
that.
and all the vehicles, the box trucks,
Right.
the SUVs,
Right.
everything on wheels, essentially lists that
But,
you
I
know
mean-
when your car's getting old, right?
We have to have some way of planning for that, so it'd be nice if it's included in that overarching report.
And this would be for bonds, right, for future bonds?
Could be, I mean, it does, we have to replace them whether we, right? So, I'd just like it in the overall picture.
Okay. Who's next?
Anybody else?
I have a couple things. if you don't- Oh, Dr. Field, yeah, we may want to look too with those buses because buses were on the 2022 bond that, especially if we get these middle school or these schools built, and there's a lot of unallocated interest sitting around in those bonds too. So
Definitely.
some of that maybe I'll play around with that, but we'll see. But keep all funding options open, for the buses. It might
I
not
would
have
tell
to be
you, but based
local.
on what I heard out of all of their reviews thus far, we've got almost 5 chillers that need to be purchased, or there will be no AC at the campuses. So I'm asking them to look into that quickly, because to Ms. Canoia's point, this whole tariff thing may play a factor, because all of it's coming from overseas, and if we can get it done quick, then,
Yeah, because I
it
think when I
might
looked
be
at Prop
a year.
2, is Mr. Guerra still here? There was like over 6 million in Prop 2's unallocated interest,
But it's-
right? Which
it's-
was just the schools and the buses.
But it's not as easy as going in and just pulling the money out. We have to see if it was related to that
No, that's what I'm
bond at
saying.
all.
Buses were on the Prop 2 bond.
In 2022, but they
Correct.
typically don't let us go in and use the bond money. We haven't even touched allocated interest or any money in 22, because they look for us to see how far along have we
Correct.
finished some
So
of
what
the
I'm
stuff.
saying is, by August of '25, you'll have, Prop B was just the 2 schools and the buses. So by next August, you'll have the 2 schools done, you'll just be finishing paying the bills, right? And then you'll have the buses. What I'm saying is, we'll have Prop 2, for the most part, closed out by next August, other than the last minute. So there may be some flexibility with that interest versus Prop 1, where we don't have a lot of the projects done. It would
I defer
wouldn't
to the
necessarily want
finance
to.
department, but I don't know if it's as easy as that prop's done, so now we can start using the money. I mean, especially when we know we have unallocated interest and extra, and money, bond funds left, like in 2017 and closer to the 2016. But before our bond lawyers would feel, and I'm looking for finance to jump in, before they would feel comfortable with us jumping in 2022, they're going to have to see the lion's share of all of that work
of
having come
that
to us.
specific prop. But yeah,
Yes.
look at all financing, type options. So since buses, thank God, were on the bond, that opens the window a little bit more to use bond money because it actually was part of it. In terms of, again, I've been going back to the balanced scorecard as I look at everybody's program reviews, and again, transportation isn't listed on there, but, academic outcomes are, and to get academic outcomes, you gotta be at school. Well, to be at school, you gotta get to school, right? So, attendance is not just a function of the finance department, it is a function of the academic learning department, and having those students at school. Have we looked into, especially since you're doing a little better with drivers now, right? We're not as desperate maybe as we were before. Working with attendance and truancy and everyone else to see, do we have some pockets where transportation may improve some of that? We have some neighborhoods that are 1.9 miles away, and sometimes they're in neighborhoods where maybe the families don't have cars to drive the 1.9 miles when it's raining, or they're adjacent to maybe hazardous type areas. So have you two departments been able to like work together to see if there are any transportation essentially solutions to maybe some of our pockets of attendance problems so that we can, especially as the winter and rainy months start to come upon us, we start to see some big attendance drops, I think, at certain schools to get those kids just back in their seats and in their classrooms, eating breakfast, lunch, and getting a supper pack every day.
Well, I can tell you this for that answer there. First of all, when I came here in 2016, we had 103 regular bus routes. We have 61 regular bus routes now, which means we decreased by 40, but we're still carrying the same amount of students, which means that our buses are not overcrowded, they're just full. And that's the problem. We have limited space in the buses. That's why a lot of these things we cannot do, because the students that do live 2 miles away should get priority for over that.
Yeah, no, I don't want kids not, some of our more absenteeism, not because they don't want to come to school. It just, some of them don't have ways, and there's some areas that I know truancy has brought up that are just challenging geographically and family-wise to get kids to school. So, if we ever have any flexibility within that system, it'd be nice to see these cross-departmental, conversations happening in support of a completely different department, right? Like transportation and truancy, talking about stuff in order to get after an academic outcome. Like those are the types of, second and third order effects when we start to put this balanced scorecard into place that I hope everybody's really thinking about. Hold on, let's see if I had any other ones. No, I think we talked about some of the other ones when we talked growth and planning and just being able to I say increase routes for maybe some kids, but also reducing our routes as much as we can by any ones within 2 miles and safe walking distance. Then, let's draw the lines in a smart way that helps saves us some money on the transportation side of the house also. Thanks. And my kids love their bus drivers, by the way. Absolutely love. We do have some of the most amazing human beings as bus drivers. So thank you to your drivers. They're out there at 4 in the morning getting buses, and I still see Brian at 10, 11 o'clock at night coming home from football games. So, and his team is out there on the road. So for your whole staff, thank you so much. Like, you're the unsung heroes on a lot of days on those roads.
Please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Now for child nutrition, I would like to highlight some of our budgetary numbers, and then I'll go into some key strategies, and then I'll wrap up with what will be needed for 25-26. So to start off, our budgetary numbers for 22-23 were about $14.9 million, and out of that we spent about $12 million. If you look at 23-24, our budgeted numbers were $17.6 million, and we spent about $14.9, roughly $15 million. Looking at 24-25, what we had budgeted was $15.8 million, and the way that we came to that number was we basically just got what we spent in 23-24, and we increased it slightly over 2%, trying to keep it very conservative for this coming year. If I give you an overview of child nutrition, we do operate 4 federal programs, which is National School Lunch Program, Breakfast Program, After School Snack Program, and our CACFP At-Risk Supper Program. It has been our vision in our department to always provide a very high quality meal at a low cost. When I look at our budgetary numbers right now, lunch reimbursement is bringing in $10.1 million. If we look at breakfast reimbursement, it's bringing in about $4.5 million. If we look at supper reimbursement, we have budgeted $2 million. And then I also mentioned on here something that is called non-program food or non-program sales, which is anything that is a la carte, which could be a second slice of pizza, bottled water, anything like that. So that is about $1.4 million. So the way that we are going to reach these budgetary numbers is just continue with our scratch cooking, that we've gone back to that. We offer high-quality proteins, and we have now cycled in locally sourced produce for the kids. So some of the results to date that I would like to point out is that every single kitchen is cooking from scratch.
We've worked hard to work with local vendors to bring in seasonal produce. Our processed items have been decreasing as the menu cycles continue to go through. One interesting fact that we found when we looked and we assessed numbers is that our biggest participation increase is at secondary schools, more specifically at high school, bringing in about 11% increase in sales. Our elementary numbers have stayed pretty status quo. They've increased maybe 2%, but we just, and this is even taking into consideration our enrollment versus our average daily participation. So even if with enrollment decreasing, we still are continuing to feed more kids with less warm bodies in the classroom. When I look at next year, some of the things that we want to do is we still are in a spend down plan. So I have about 600 and maybe 40,000 that needs to be spent, or I've earmarked it for spending in the program. We have 2 serving lines that I will be bringing to you, which is probably Kitty Hawk and Spring Meadows. Those serving lines are not running as efficiently. They're failing, and so Spring Meadows was built in 1984. It is the original line, and then we have Kitty Hawk that was built a little later in 1975, but that line has just had a tremendous amount of use, and so it needs to be replaced. I will close with some budgetary revenue money. And you can look at 22-23, which was about 22.5 million. If we look at 23-24, we brought in 21 million. And then 24-25, we're looking at 20 million. If you look at the trend, we are bringing in a little bit less revenue, but it's because we have lost a lot of grants that the government gave that were expanded past COVID. Like there was an act that was called Keep Kids Fed Act that has ended. There was a supply chain act that brought in over $1 million, and that has ended. And so that is why you see the numbers trending in that direction. Thank you. I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you for your report. I have a couple of questions. Tell me about the free breakfast for, well, actually, you're serving free breakfast for all?
Yes,
elementary,
universal breakfast for all.
Middle school and high school.
Pre-K through 12, yes, sir.
Who takes advantage of that more? Is it the elementary or the middle school or the high school?
I would say it's pretty even. It used to be elementary with breakfast in the classroom, but we have opened up second chance breakfast at high school. And so kids, I mean, we are feeding probably 600 to 800 kids, like at Veterans, we're feeding, and this is breakfast alone. And
yes.
Same thing with Wagner, where we have a second chance breakfast. So if you are running late in the morning and you don't have the opportunity to come into us, we stay open later till 9 o'clock, and then you can come in after first period to pick up breakfast.
I think that's excellent.
Thank
I
you.
would love to make sure if we could give them lunch for elementary, middle school, and high school, but that's impossible. But I think you're doing real good on your budget. Thank you, and we appreciate that. You and Mr. Johnson also. Thank you, sir.
And also transportation, thank you so much. There was nothing more to say at that point because Ms. Ryan had already thanked you, but I know the board appreciates your work. So, in regards to child nutrition, I did meet with three different 4th and 5th grade classes over the last month, and surprisingly, they brought up they want better tasting food when I asked about their food. So, you know, again, back what I said earlier, you can't always make everyone happy. I get that there's requirements that they probably don't understand that we need to provide in what they eat. But you won't see a lot of dissension, if you will, from a 1st grader or 2nd grader. They just won't eat the food, right? But your 4th or 5th graders, if we're empowering them to be advocates, they're starting to say something. And those were the classes that I visited with that had something to say. So I'm wondering if you can take the initiative, Dr. Fields, to ask students in 4th and 5th grade, what more would they like? Because it's all about a great experience, and this is one where they probably will say that, but it's an experience that I want them to really feel is over the top. And food is a really good, easy thing to do. We have money that's probably set aside in our budget for us to maybe do that. So I just want to ask you, have you surveyed fourth and fifth graders anywhere in the district?
Well, we are in the process right now, as we met as a team, and we thought, how can we get better customer feedback? Because these students are our customers. And we always compete from a box lunch from home, or we compete with someone who dropped off food for them. And so we're always trying to see how we can have better participation. So we've already ordered for each campus like a survey box that can be in the cafeteria, and so that it's going to have like a poster board that says, give us your feedback, and it'll have cards on there. We'll have different cards dealing on what we're serving that day. So, and it'll be very quick, because we know everything happens at a very fast pace in a lunchroom. But it could be as simple as what we use for the Superintendent's Advisory Council, where we give them a card and they give us feedback, and it's just a smiley face, a sad face, or I just don't have a comment. So every student will have an opportunity in the lunchroom to say, this is what I did like, or this is what I did not like about what we're serving that day.
Okay. And then the last part of it, and obviously I'll think about what you said and see if there's any other ideas that come to my mind as we go forward. But the other one that I know that we've talked about on this board before is waste, and giving students, and we're throwing away a lot of food, or we're not using it. So have you addressed that, I guess, in a strong way?
Managers and supervisors always look at plate waste, and it looks to see like how much is going into the trash. And that is just as critical as a manager's paperwork, right? So we are a federal program. We have a lot of paperwork that we fill out, and it's all of our leftovers, and it's all of the food that we prepared at the end of the day. So at the end of each day, you have like a story that you can read and see what food came in, what food was cooked, and what food was left over. So that's just an additional component as looking at a plate waste, where when we have interns that come and rotate through Judson, a lot of their schoolwork is to do a plate waste analysis. And so we have them go out there and we put them at different schools, and they'll do those plate waste analysis for us and give us feedback.
And you're able to take action on that information?
Yes, yes. With our team, we have meetings, and yes, we implement it. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I would just say before we go on to, did you want to move to CCMR or?
I hate for anybody to be here and not have a chance to present. There. Okay, I hate for anyone to be here and not have a chance to present. I think we can do CCMR, and then we'll just have to move the human resources to another meeting.
My only concern about human resources is that they have a conference in our next one, so we would actually have to move human resources to January. They wouldn't be here in December.
That's all right.
Got it?
Yeah. I have someone sick at home, and I can't be gone, until midnight. It's already 9 o'clock. I think we have time for one more presentation. I would like for it to be CCMR.
Understood. As you guys go ahead and move, I do want to say this publicly. Thank you so much. Our transportation department is great. Our child nutrition department is great. Maintenance and facilities are killing it. So thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Good afternoon, board members. Once again, we would like to share the CCMR and advanced academics budget. We're going to start off. You can see that there are a few more budgets under this department, and that's because in CCMR we had previously combined other departments, and so these are all of the budgets that Mr. Holmes and his team member, Ms. Bowie, work with: advanced academics, STEM, post-secondary, early college and dual credit, SAT, cybersecurity, prep, springboard, National Hispanic Institute, GT, and CCMR.
Yeah, so just briefly going over our department, we do cover college and career military readiness, accountability for the state, gifted and talented, academic enrichment in elementary, academic competitions, dual credit, honors, advanced placement, SAT, PSAT, ACT, and the college and career readiness school models, which is your JECA, your T-STEM, and your P-TECH. So talking of strategies or key things we're looking at this year, one of them, looking at the scorecard for the superintendent, we do want to increase our TSI readiness by 1%, and that's dealing with TSI, SAT, ACT, and things of that nature.
And to answer the question that we know is coming up, this is directly impacting the scorecard. So this department supports the increase in academics specifically.
I believe it's 1.3, priority 1.3 is me, yeah. So.
The department.
Yeah, the department, yes, ma'am. So you get the GT component. The thing we're really focusing on and have been focusing on for a little while now is increasing the equity and quality of our GT services. We're wanting to make sure that we're getting all the kids who need those services in, and that we're providing them with solid services there. And then we are also looking at, go ahead.
And we do that through our AET program, which is stands for Academic Enrichment Teachers, who also support not just the GT program, but one of the things that we did a few years ago is to turn that into an academic enrichment program. So they work with all students, but they focus on GT.
Right. And then we're looking at improving the quality of student education through other enrichment opportunities, through advanced placement, through dual credit, and our CCRSM school models that we have.
And he was just sharing with me our increase in AP.
Correct. So I did just a quick tabulation. We did increase in this past year from 1,097 students in AP programming to 1,363, which is a 24% increase. And then for the enrollments in AP courses, because a kid can take more than one AP course, we increased from 1,741 to 2,262, which is a 30% increase. So there has been quite a bit of increase in AP participation since last year to this year. And I think part of that is when one of the challenges for AP was the 5x5. It's great for dual credit. It's really hard for advanced placement. It's kind of one of those things where you have to look at the pros and cons, but it is something that has really helped out there. So. And then just results to date. One of the things that we have been working on, obviously, and this is tons of departments are working on this because it's a big deal, is CCMR. And so we've been trying to increase our CCMR, and I want to report that before COVID in 2019, our TSI criteria for CCMR was 38%, and this past year it was 46%. And then we have grown as a district from 2023 to 2024 on our CCMR accountability from 54% to 64%. So we have been making gains when it comes to CCMR as we're working together with each of the high schools, with CTE, with special education, with assessment and accountability. And so it's been a good partnership. And then we are increasing our GT referrals. We had 400 more referrals this past year. We're looking at ways to not only increase the referrals, but make sure that we're identifying the kids. We're putting in additional measures and additional supports for that. And then we are also recruiting heavily for our T-STEM, JECA, and P-TECH. That recruitment process has already kicked off this year, and we're trying to get as many folks into those programs as we can. And also, finally, AP exams, the scores did increase by 11% for this past year. And then things that I want to ask for, I just need $15,000 for AP textbooks. Anybody? No. So, and then we wanted to mention the academic enrichment teachers, just so you know, again, looking at it, right now we have 19 split-funded FTEs doing academic enrichment and GT. 55% of that's coming out of title. The other 45% is coming from our GT allotment. And then as far as expenses for that program, we spent $31,000 in title this year for that program.
Any questions?
Okay, sorry. sorry, I will go fast because I've already half interrogated. But again, this is an area where we are growing by leaps and bounds. And so keeping that momentum, because this is what changed on our accountability ratings the most, right? The state changed this. So if we're doing amazing, I really want to make sure you have everything you need and that we are doing everything we can, because I think this is an area we can grow the most in of anywhere, on any of our stuff. So, hold on, what do I have? Oh, talk to me about UT on-ramps, because we are way low compared to the region, like a fifth of what other districts are doing. Why are we not using that program more? Because it's free.
So UT on-ramps is not free. It does have a tuition cost associated with it. But it's not, but there is this new thing that came out with FAST, which is financial aid for swift transfer.
Yes.
Which is reducing that cost substantially.
For all,
But I don't know if
especially for
it's
individuals,
completely
right?
free at this point, but it is,
Okay.
it is fairly inexpensive. The issue is that, one of them is that UT on-ramps does not necessarily guarantee credit at the end, because you have to accept it or not, but it also takes the entire year to do one college credit course.
Okay.
And I think for a lot of people, the dual credit where you get your credit in a semester is more appealing to them. And then the other reason is because we only use UT on-ramps at Wagner High School. Because the other expense for UT on-ramps is the ongoing professional development, which will be $700-800 a year for those folks. So we will see a large increase in UT on-ramps this year because we did bring on UT on-ramps chemistry for this year. Because we feel like getting chemistry from UT especially for our T-STEM students, will be a huge help when they're going to college to be able to have that under. So we are increasing those numbers, but I think that it's part of balancing different programs and priorities. We have dual credit, we have advanced placement, and we have UT on-ramps, and you can't have all three of them at the same level.
Okay. We talk about SAT and ACT, it's our favorite thing to argue about. Because what I'm seeing is a lot of emphasis on testing, right? The taking of the test. And, I saw the PSAT scores that just came out for us. And PSAT is supposed to be a direct indicator now to project your SAT score. Way back in the day, it was just a random number, but now it's supposed to. So, when our district average goes down to an 838, is what it was on the PSAT, like that's way lower than our SAT average is, and lower than a region, lower than the state. So what are we doing to focus on test preparation versus taking more tests and taking TSI and taking ACT and taking SAT? And is the 7 schedule helping us at all? Because now we've got a 30-minute extra block at the high school level, advisory or whatever you want to call it, that extra 30 minutes that's in 4th period. An extra 30 minutes? Yes, but on the 5x5, it was 75, 90, 90, 90, 75. So it wasn't just, okay, well, it was the same length of time as 2nd and 4th period also, not just 3rd period, was an extra 30. Right now, the only class period that is an extra 30 minutes is the 4th period. So are we using that time for something? Because it seems like some sort of test prep, whether that's ASVAB test prep, SAT, ACT, TSI, counseling, fentanyl training, CPR, whatever. We've got this great captive, block with the students built in the day now, because just taking the test does nothing for the kids. Doing well on the test does something for the kids. And especially with the new, or the increased support from Khan Academy now, because obviously my kid just took the PSAT, and as soon as her scores came out, she got the invite to the online tutoring and webinars and all this other cool stuff that's all completely free. but, getting kids to go do it on their own at home versus you're in hey, everybody log in and start working on your stuff for 30 minutes. So how can we switch the focus from just more testing into more preparation and more focus on some specific tests to get better outcomes on those tests?
Right, so what I'm hearing is you're looking at ways to utilize time to possibly emphasize the particular tests and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, and the ones that may be appropriate, because spending time on SAT might not be appropriate for every student. The
Might be
ASVAB or something
TSI,
else.
might be ASVAB.
Yep.
It's understandable. I think that that's a conversation that has been ongoing, and I know that there have been challenges to trying to nail down test prep for everybody on that level. I do know we provide support for that, and obviously SAT's doing that, but that is definitely an area that we can look to grow in. And it's something that is, and we'll all, I mean, it's always a balance of how much do you go all in on this versus into something else they need. And I think a lot of what the focus has been on students who haven't been successful in STAR and things of that nature to make sure. And truthfully, if you're successful in STAR, it's going to help you be successful in SAT. If you're successful in STAR, it's going to help you be successful on TSI. And I think that when you look at folks struggling academically, I think focusing on those areas is not a bad place to start.
Yeah.
And then doing some test prep along that way, especially just familiarizing yourself with the test, will be something that's helpful. And it's something we can look at in the future.
Yeah, really, because it really crosses a bunch of different departments, because it's counseling, it's academics, and all of that, and students truly understanding what their next step is, right? What do I need to be doing? I'm a 10th grader, oh, I need to be studying for the PSAT, or I want to go join the military, I need to be studying, and so that they know what that next thing is, and then they're given some time in their school day to be working on that specific thing that they're supposed to be working on, whether that's their resume or filling out Apply Texas, or whatever is on their roadmap for whatever they're going to do, because it'd be great to see those scores go up, because we have put the emphasis and told kids, the ones who are going to college, hey, getting your SAT score up is important. There are merit scholarships, there are this, that, and everything. And so putting that emphasis on the kids and carving out time makes it a priority for everybody if it's dedicated in the schedule. Did we cut UTSA Cybersecurity Academy? I didn't see that on there when I moved from last year to this year.
The answer is that was a program that was under my department before I was in the department.
Okay.
And so that program was basically discontinued.
Okay.
So I went ahead and this past year just took that money back to the general budget for the district.
Okay.
And so that's why you don't see it on this year's.
Okay. And then Springboard, I saw a huge increase in that from what you spent last year to what you're budgeted for this year. What is that, and how many students we have participating in?
Okay, so
whatever
Springboard is a misnomer, if you will, because originally that's what we were spending for like some of our AP, pre-AP support, curriculum. And so now we use that same thing now for other AP expenses, textbooks, things of that nature. That's where that money's coming.
Oh, okay.
So when you see the increase in Springboard to $59,639, that's because we have purchased a bunch of new textbooks for AP.
Okay, AP resources. Okay. You Google Springboard and all sorts of things come up, even.
Yeah, they're
I'm like,
discontinuing
I'm not even sure
Springboard.
what that is.
Yeah.
And then I think just, as it'll be interesting to see your GT numbers come spring with the increased testing and then the coordination with human resources on how we do this, because we look at some old numbers and we've got campuses that have 3 GT students, but they have a full-time GT teacher. And so those are the kind of things we have to answer to, and so the more kids you can get in the program, that helps justify, more people on campuses, or if there's creative HR solutions, whether that's itinerant teachers or what that is, based on that new population. Once you guys are done with testing, I look forward to seeing some of those collaborations over what the best way to serve that population is, while still preserving funds as much as possible, so we can do more things and lots of things. So, all right, I think I harassed you enough. Thank you. Of course, I love I love your program and all the things that you are doing and how diverse it is. But I see good things on the horizon with all of these numbers, so I'm super excited.
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask if Dr. Saunders or Thompson wanted to have a response to any of that, or I know that 30 minutes is embedded in the
30 minutes
lunch.
at the high school level is embedded. We try to address the needs of our seniors because those are the students that are on their way out to either career, college, or whatever they're going to do. So we try to embed the preparation and whatnot for SAT and all the other different types of tests within our English 4 classes, but we are still obligated to cover the TEKS that are required by the state of Texas.
And then Dr. Saunders, is academic enrichment reserved to
Thank
the
you.
3
Thank you.
students, or?
No, so the academic enrichment teachers at elementary do serve the students that are identified through gifted and talented testing, but they also offer academic enrichment for other students.
Thank you.
Which, when we talk about a springboard,
As they
helps.
can. But
Yes.
some of them obviously have a huge GT load, so
Yes.
their amount that they can support is much less versus someone who may only have this many GT kids and then has lots of time to give to the rest of the student body.
Agreed, because the idea behind that is let's start really focusing at those under-identified students.
Yes.
Because giftedness looks different in every child.
Yep.
So when you have a highly qualified, gifted, and talented teacher who's able to access all students, it raises the water level for everyone.
No, that's why I'm hoping those numbers are going to look way different in spring because of how much attention we've been placing on those groups that have been under-identified. And so I hope 3 per campus won't be what the numbers show in spring once we're done with testing. I'm hoping to see much more robust numbers on every campus, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to extend my thanks again to everyone who presented tonight. We
Sorry,
appreciate
Mr.
it.
Mayor.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I
I
thought
have
you did
comments.
not, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I might not want to, but I mean, I'm here to speak, so I'm going to say something. Thank you, Ms. Connor. So bottom line is that this argument with SAT, TSI has all been happening. We've been talking about this since 2012, 2011. This is all old hat. The problem is that we have now 10 years of SAT data to see what we need to do to move the needle, and our strategies have not produced those results. To Dr. Duhart's point, though, we're teaching to TEKS. SAT is a national curriculum, and it's different. And so that's going to be very big for us to talk about at the state level. You want us to do better at SAT? Well, help us educate what's being on the national curriculum. Am I right in saying that?
To a certain degree, yes. I mean, there are plenty of overlaps there, but SAT doesn't necessarily focus on the exact same things. Sorry. Can you not hear me okay? So yes, there is not a one-to-one correlation between the content on the SAT and the content that's taught in the TEKS. Nor is that the same for the ACT as well, because there is content that they'll cover that isn't necessarily covered in our standard curriculum for mathematics if you're going in a normal pathway.
And my only suggestion to add to this conversation is an earlier effort in 5th and 6th grade to really get emphasis on some of those key points, because kiddos are just kind of filling in, not filling in, whatever they're doing online. We need them to be competitive when they're taking the test. We need them to understand what they're learning or what they're trying to test on. And I think that'll be the difference, because again, we have the data. I want to see some movement in that area, because that changes everything. And then lastly, I put my older daughter in Sylvan. Sylvan helped her tremendously with her math and her reading. And I'd like to see us incorporate some of those practices, because I've seen it. She was dyslexic. She had some challenges, but it really helped. So there are private entities that are doing things that maybe we can consider incorporating, if we're not already doing that, to reach students. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? All right, as I was saying, thank you again so much for everyone who presented. Board members, would you take a quick look at the personnel report? If you don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and vote on it. If you do have questions, we'll adjourn to closed session, because there are a couple of people that we need to approve tonight.
I do have a question, but I can just ask somebody else. Other than that, I have no problem.
No, she's not on there.
Constantine?
I don't think so. Nope. No, because this, she just submitted that.
Right. This is just,
Be on the next one.
this is just an interim. There'll still be something for
She'll
next
be
week.
on the next one.
Next week.
So do we need to go to closed session, or can we vote? Nope. All right. Can I have a motion, please?
I make a motion that we accept the personnel report as written.
Motion by Ms. Eaton, second by Mr. Salinas. If you'll go ahead and vote, please. Motion passes 7-0. And with nothing further this evening, we are adjourned at 9:30 PM. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.